And now you can pull up that window to make sure we're live. Yep. The audience probably can hear me. All right, we're live, so you can go back to vMix and now hit 8. Here, let me grab the thing for a sec.
Welcome, everybody. I was tempted to do the welcome like John Oliver, because maybe then I'll get a couple of Emmys like he did the other night. But welcome to the Hang Up here on the line. I'm Matt Dilahunty. I'm not going to give any sort of significant update on my health other than to say that as it stands now, I'm fine. And I'm sorry for those who are worried after Sunday's kind of weird ischemic episode and whatever. Also, tonight isn't about Charlie Kirk or left-right violence or things related to that, though it will definitely be mentioned. It's about something else, and it's a call-in show, so you don't know what people are necessarily going to call in for or anything else. A week ago, I was going to do this show, and I had slightly different examples. That's why I say that this is actually the show about science and science education that I wanted to do, but I do have different examples because of what's happened in the last week. So if you were to ask a child, is it wrong to punch your brother? Hopefully, most of them would say yes. You're probably going to get some exceptions. I'm not talking in absolutes here. I'm not a Sith. But hopefully they'd say yes. And you wonder if the answer is different, whether you're talking about, is it okay to punch your big brother? Is it okay to punch your little brother? Is it okay to punch your friend? Is it okay to punch a stranger? Is it okay to punch an enemy? You might get varying answers. And if you ask even the person who says it's wrong to punch their brother, if you ask them this while their brother is dangling a toy they want over their head, taunting them, you might get a different answer. Because the ideal that people perceive when asked a question can be overridden by the scenario. This is, we know this to be the case about how humans interact. I'm opposed to the Supreme Court's ruling on fighting words, as I mentioned the other day, because I don't accept the notion that there are some things that one could say that would excuse a violent response. I think there are things that people could say that would make a violent response understandable, but not excusable. Understandable in the sense that we understand human behavior, but that doesn't mean that it is something that we just say, oh, yeah, no big deal. And so if you showed a third party that scenario of those boys and one of them being taunted, you might also get a mix of answers about when is it okay to, sock them and how hard or at all. Because reality is complex, there are very rarely black and white answers unless you ask very specific questions. If you drill your questions down to the point where there are only two options, now you get the sort of black or not black, which is different from black and white. And this is one of the reasons why myself and others rely heavily on propositional logic, where you're not evaluating multiple things, you are combining propositions in its simplest form to reach a conclusion, because it's much easier to show which part you might accept or reject. So when we're going around asking people, what do they think about something? What's your opinion on a particular act? When is it justified, etc.? We're going to get different answers. And this, because of the complexities of both people self-reporting their view, what they think their view is, and the complexity surrounding the question, it makes statistical analysis incredibly complicated. How do you know whether or not you have a representative sample? And what is it representative of? Or what is it that you're looking for? And so a lot of this comes down to making sure that you're starting with asking the right questions. Asking the right questions is probably the number one thing that I would recommend, is that people were frequently asking the wrong questions. How do you know that the question that you're asking doesn't include bias in the question itself? What information are you looking for exactly? How narrow do you want to be? It's a complicated process. And I am not, full disclosure, nobody's going to be surprised, not a statistician. And I don't have one with me today, although one of these days we should get a statistician on to teach us some stuff about, p-values and things. How strong of a correlation is there between two things? Because if the question we're asking is there a correlation or a connection between X and Y? The null hypothesis is that there's no correlation between them. That is the default assumption. We begin with and maintain that there is no connection between these two things until such time as it's demonstrated. There is no connection between vaccines and autism until such time as it's demonstrated. And there is no, by the way, connection between the supernatural and things that exist until such time as it's demonstrated. This is why I rely on the default position, the null hypothesis, etc. It doesn't say that there isn't anything supernatural, and it doesn't say there isn't a connection between two things. It just says we need to operate on the assumption that there's not a connection until it's warranted. And then where there is a correlation, how strong of a correlation is it? And do we have any way to demonstrate that it is causal and not merely correlated? There's a great book that I recommend very frequently called Innumeracy by John Allen Paulos. I would recommend every single person on the planet go and read it. It is almost anybody can understand the things in the book. It is genuinely the first book I recommend almost all the time on almost any subject, because it will open your eyes to the ways that you are being deceived, both by your own biases and by biases in reality, and by biases in the presentation of the statistics, and by biases in the gathering of the statistics. So there's been a lot of talk in the last week about whether or not who's more violent, the right or the left. And the vice president of the United States went on TV and announced that the left has more lunatics, and that's the one. It's not an even problem. We don't have a problem with both sides. The left are the ones that are violent, and they have more lunatics. Listen to the language that people are using, because lunatic is not only not a diagnostic term, it doesn't have any value at all. It is basically saying, it is like saying crazy. It is, these are the people that I think are nuts. It has nothing to do with who they are, what their actual views are, none of it. Also, take a look at how they frame what they're talking about. Somebody decided to send me a study to suggest that it is, in fact, the left that has a problem with violence. That study came from Network Contagion Research Institute, associated with Rutgers University. And specifically, it is called Assassination Culture: How Burning Teslas and Killing Billionaires Became a Meme Aesthetic for Political Violence. And when you go through the actual published results of the study, in the base population, 31% of respondents were okay with violence directed at Elon Musk, and 38.5% of respondents were okay with violence directed at Donald Trump. And from the left, those numbers climb to 50 to 56%. And on the right, those numbers drop to 14 and 20%. I find it amusing that even 20% of the people on the right seem to be okay with violence directed. So it's lower than average on those two questions for people on the right, and higher than average for those questions for people on the left. The same thing is true. The numbers almost line up across the board on destroying property, Tesla dealerships, and things like that. And it goes in and talks about perceived justification and everything else. The study itself, you can look up. I've given you the initial information. You can do a quick search. It doesn't really list its methodology. And I had a lot of questions. But I didn't have to go digging because some of the problems are obvious. This is something very recent that happened. And this study specifically talks about two specific individuals and property from one of those individuals. This is while the left is outraged at what the new Trump administration is doing and how Elon Musk, who wasn't elected to anything, has access to their private information. They're firing people left and right. They're both enriching themselves. And there's just accusations flying all over the place. Essentially, that study was done at the time that the big brother is dangling the toy over the left's head, saying, ah, ha, ha, we've got your toy. We're not going to get your toy. And you might get different answers then. Additionally, there were problems about your self-reporting who you are you on the left or are you on the right, and what your view is. And instead of it being an abstract sense about general violence, it's very, very specific. I remember I just posted a clip of it the other day, like 15, 16 years ago. There was somebody that called into the atheist experience and said they're going to come down and punch me in my fat face for Jesus. And somebody wrote a song about it. And it's funny. And I get threats. I've had a couple of death threats in this past week, and a couple of not quite death threats, but hateful remarks directed at me. And I tend to turn them over to the FBI, just in case. And there are people who look into this stuff, and I'm not overly worried. I'm always worried, but I'm not overly worried. I try to be measured, because whether or not somebody says they're going to do something and whether or not they do it are two completely different things. We'd love to all think that we know what we're going to do in a scenario, but we don't. You don't really know until you're tested. So since the study asked about Trump and Musk and Tesla at the height of the objections to Doge, you're already asking a group of people something at a particularly hot time. You might as well be saying, how happy are you and how pissed are you right now? At some point, if you ask those same questions about Hitler, you might have gotten a big spike from the left. And if you ask those same questions about Jews, you might have got a big spike from the right. Oh my gosh, Matt just compared them all to Nazis. Yeah. Sometimes you go to the extremes to make a point, and sometimes you just show that the extremes are already fairly analogous. But aggregate studies of actual violence consistently show that while there is a problem across the board, there's more of a problem on the ideological far right than there is on the far left. It's all bad. I'll say it again for all the people who missed it the 18 other times I said it in the last week. It's all bad. It's all of it is bad. None of it is justified. The trans shooter that killed people was wrong and awful. The shooter that shot Charlie Kirk was wrong and awful. However, asking people what they're okay with and then asking them what they're willing to do and then seeing what they're willing to do are different questions. And the studies are relevant only to the extent that you've asked the right questions. I think it's wrong to steal. But during Hurricane Katrina, there was both acceptable stealing, looting of bread and medicine and things that people needed, that some of which was just going to go to waste and some of it was essential. And then there was unacceptable looting. There was opportunistic looting, people stealing televisions because, hey, the police and everybody else are busy trying to keep people from dying. If you ask the wrong questions, your results are kind of worthless. And there's a ton of problems with self-reports. So if I'm going to cite the Cato Institute and all these, I was going to cite a paper that was on the US government's website, but the US government has taken that study down. This is what the current administration is doing. Not only are they actively lying about what the data show, but they're scrubbing government websites of the data that contradicts their position. And then people are passing around things like this study here. Now, this study is still interesting. I don't know how valuable it is. And it definitely shows that at least at some point in recent months, there were people on the left who were absolutely more willing to advocate violence against Trump, Musk, and Tesla than people on the right were. Which is a little like saying, are you more likely to advocate violence against your ex-boyfriend that you think was abusive or random person on the street? Those might be very different things. And so if I'm going to show studies, and these people are going to come back to me with this study, if everyone has their own experts and their own studies and ignores the others, what do we rely on? And how can we change someone else's mind? As I said, this isn't about violence or Kirk. This is about how we're going to reach people, change their minds. How are we going to educate people on things? How are we going to say, oh, we both care about the same thing and we both are looking at the same facts. We're just viewing them differently if we're not looking at the same facts. If you're citing your experts in your study, and I'm going to have to spend time pointing out the flaws in that or agreeing with it, and I'm citing my experts in my study, and you just, nope, I'm not accepting those. How do you reach people if you can't even agree on what a reliable source is? I remember growing up, and this is kind of what started this entire pursuit. All the time on television, there'd be somebody in a lab coat selling something. And one of my favorites was, and this may not be word for word. I intentionally have not looked this up, but I did watch TV a lot as a kid, and Saturday morning stuff and Schoolhouse Rock stuck in my head. But this particular slogan stuck in my head. 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Trident sugar-free gum to their patients who chew gum. I don't see advertisements like that as much anymore. And that particular advertisement was very dishonest in the sense that they were honest in what they said. 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Trident sugar-free gum to their patients who chew gum. However, it makes it seem like they're saying this is a good thing. Dentists are endorsing you chewing this particular gum. When in reality, what is more likely is that 90% of dentists that were polled said, you probably shouldn't chew gum at all, but if you're going to, this is the least worst option. But that doesn't sell gum. 9 out of 10 dentists agree this is the least worst gum you can chew. Maybe today that would sell fuck tons of gum. We like it when they just say what they mean. You know, there was a great movie called Crazy People where Dudley Moore ends up in an asylum as a stressed out ad agency, and the people in the asylum come up with honest advertisements, and it completely changes the ad industry. And there's Ferrari for men who like to get hand jobs from beautiful women they barely know. And And it's funny, but it also has some insight into how we are consistently lying with statistics. And so a begrudging endorsement of something becomes a seemingly glowing recommendation by how you frame it. You put them in a lab coat, you put them on TV, you get what you want. I don't see that as often anymore. And I wonder, is it because we exploited the trust in science by putting people in lab coats and misrepresenting things? Or has something else happened to make us generally less trustful of science? One of the things I hear a lot from callers to the various shows are, well, science keeps changing and it finds out it was wrong about this other thing. So why should I trust it? And I was like, because it's the single most reliable path to an accurate understanding of reality. And at no point in history has science been corrected by anything other than better science. So if you stay in line with the current science, you are going to be wrong about a great many things, but you are going to be more right than if you rely on any other method. No other method has a demonstrated track record as consistent as science done properly in peer review. Science keeps changing, and that's frustrating for people because what they want is something simple, something solid, something steady, something they can rely on so that they can say, this is the way it is. That's the way it is. These are the bad guys. That's good for you. That's bad for you. Now I don't have to think about anything. I can get back to my life, and I completely understand it because there's too much to focus on. It's not just, oh, we're all lazy. No, we're all busy. Ain't nobody got time to go study everything from every paper everywhere. So you pick out the sources that you trust. That's probably the most important part. And now here we are in 2025. We have flat earthers, we have anti-vaxxers, we have Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as the Director of Health and Human Services, who is an irrational anti-science individual who has made the world worse and more dangerous, has upset things at the CDC. There are people quitting. There are science papers being shut down. There are guidelines and guide rails on various things that are being shut down. They're denouncing various aspects of vaccines, all kinds of ridiculous things that aren't supported by the science. And even if they were right, the time to accept them would be after they were supported by science, not after RFK Jr. and whatever mystic he listened to while he was hugging a bear in a pile of poop somewhere told him was the right thing. Now, we're not going to fix anything tonight, probably, I suspect. But I think it is worth looking into what we might be able to fix. I mean, the world is falling apart in a number of different areas. Is it really the time to start talking about, hey, how do we rehabilitate the public's trust in science? My gut instinct is to show them how much science they already trust and show how the same science that leads to me being able to broadcast with minimal delay my thoughts, my image, my voice to the entire world, apart from wherever I'm blocked, that the same science behind that applies in another area and another area and another area. And so completely separate inventions and disciplines act as support for other ideas. That's the best answer I come up with. I don't know that it's right. It may be the worst way to convince people to get a kind of a rehabilitated confidence and trust in science. We have access to more and better information and better education than at any point in history. And to me, it feels like we're going backwards. Science denial and science misrepresentation and confusion seems to be, to me, at an all-time high. Is that the case, or is it just my perception? How do we know which sources to trust? And how do we show other people what sources they should potentially trust and figure out who's right? I don't know why the people who didn't study in school are suddenly, doing their own research and dismissing the experts, but they are. And so it would seem to me that one of the best things we should do is figure out why that's happening and how we can fix it. Because if everybody's an expert, nobody is. But tonight I brought in somebody who at least has more expertise than I do on almost everything I've talked about. Dr. Aaron Adair is here with me to, how do we fix this, Aaron? Welcome. What do we need to do to make science great again?
Well, my first instinct, though, is to avoid acronyms. One, I'm terrible with them. Two, I don't even want to have an acronym associated with the MAGA stuff. So I'm going to avoid the four-letter acronyms, and I might use some other four-letter words to describe those acronyms.
That's fair.
Yeah. I definitely feel, so similar about how the perception of science has gone, but I also see this. Just a few days ago, Apple showed their new lineup of iPhones. I have the new one from last year, so already it's out of date. And guess what? People are going to rush to get the newest iPhone and its tech increases. People seem to be very happy with science and engineering when it improves, except in certain areas. I think a lot of the anti-science stuff is in some ways isolated to particular subjects. And let me just give an example of someone I think we might both agree right now is quite anti-science. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yes.
Clearly
and the worm piloting his brain. I'm sorry, I made a bad joke. Yeah. We shouldn't do that. Let me back off of the cheap and easy jokes and let you get to RFK Jr.
Yes. Yeah. Like I say, he is completely off on pretty much everything related to medicine. But he is 100% on board when it comes to the science showing that climate change is real. Recently, I was listening to the audiobook by Michael Mann and Peter Hotez. Michael Mann is a famed climatologist. Peter Hotez is a doctor down in Texas who's done a lot of work in creating vaccines, including creating vaccines that'll be useful to those in third world countries and producing those vaccines outside of the pharmaceutical network. So, not another way for Pfizer to make $100 billion or whatever. But anyways, in their recent book, Mann talks about, hey, clearly RFK is way off the deep end when it comes to here, but I've worked with him before in pushing for seeing the reality of climate change, and we need to do things to mitigate that. So it's kind of weird, isn't it, that RFK is clearly doing his own research when it comes to vaccines and is very much trying to go for one particular narrative, but he's totally willing to accept climate change, which is, I would say the data for interpreting that requires just as much skill as it does for, interpreting vaccine studies. At the very least, they both got a lot of math. They got a lot of statistics to go through. So why is he accepting one versus the other? One narrative he likes, the other narrative he doesn't like. And I see that as often the case here, that there's a general liking of science and technology, except for hot button issues that go against your ideology.
I think this is a really great example because, correct anything that I get even remotely wrong at the drop of a hat, but the data with regard to the effectiveness and safety of vaccines is incredibly strong. We have years and years and years of showing this and how we've essentially eliminated or had almost eliminated a number of diseases. When it comes to climate change, the data, while I think it is strong and incredibly strong that something has happened, there might be some dubiousness on what's the cause of it or what we can do about it or anything like that. And so it seems to me that the science around climate change, just even though they're incomparable, would seem like strong, but not as strong as the vaccines. And yet he's accepting, in my view, the one that is less strong. Is that kind of fair?
I guess it depends on how you measure it, because, in some ways, the evidence for vaccines is just so gobsmackingly obvious. For example, smallpox is eliminated. And before basically the mid-20th century and the introduction of a smallpox vaccine, it was one of the great killers throughout human history. It's killed hundreds of millions of people, and now it kills no one. It doesn't even exist. I wish climate change could say, here's this example of how well we know this thing works. Because going from millions dead to not even a single person infected, that is some incredible progress that is very powerful. But on the other hand, you can always try to find some sort of ancillary way to try to explain it by some other means. And I think RFK in particular somehow thinks it's something environmental. It doesn't, of course, explain the data very well. Like, well, why is only this disease going away once there's a vaccine if you're saying it's something environmental that affects one disease that just happens to coincide when the one vaccine comes out for that one disease, and then the other disease goes away when the vaccine comes out. So measles seems to only start going away when there's a measles vaccine, even when all the other environmental factors are changing for all the diseases at once. So it's extremely haphazard, but again, it's the only way you can get there is you have that motivated reasoning. And when you're motivated, you can make anything, quote unquote, true. And I'm putting that in the biggest, scariest, quote, scare marks I can make with my fingers.
Yeah. It reminds me of something. I think the quote goes to Michael Shermer, but I'd ask him, but we don't really speak anymore. But I think he said, smart people are really good at rationalizing justifications for things they came to believe for not smart reasons. And that's kind of the motivated reason you're talking about. Quick side note, which I'm sure we'll have a truckload of. I'm terrified of smallpox only because while I got the vaccine, I got a little scar and everything else, and it doesn't exist. It exists in labs. And we're entering an era where nobody's been vaccinated for it. And now it could be potentially weaponized in an incredibly deadly way, is my understanding. Not that you necessarily have the answer, but I was like, a friend of mine wrote a poem to the tune of Jesus Loves the Little Children. And the crux of it is that Jesus gives them, whooping cough and cleft palates and all this stuff, but he can't give them smallpox anymore because the science, even God can't give you smallpox. It's just gone. And it's a great little testimony for what we've done with science. But also, I don't know what the risk is with that, but please continue with motivated reasoning and stuff, because we got to figure out something.
Yeah. Though what you did say, of course, it's probably worth noting, there is actually a difference between hazard and risk. It's actually good to keep these two things separate because sharks, great white sharks, are hazardous. The risk of being bitten by a shark is low because I'm on land.
It's so, Arden and I had this exact conversation today, but we didn't put it in a great little term like hazard versus risk. I was busy coming up with little nuggets like the difference between understandable and excusable for clarity, but hazard versus risk is exactly that, because it's like you have like a 1 in 11 million chance of dying in a plane crash, and you're more likely to get eaten by a shark. And we're like, yeah, but not if you don't ever go in the ocean because you're terrified of sharks. You've reduced your risk to pretty much zero.
Yes. Yeah, so it is good knowing that there are these terms to talk about these things separately, that something can be hazardous, but the risk be minuscule for other reasons. Nonetheless, while I have the optimism that right now, when people are being anti-scientific, it can be very limited in the things that they will attack, but I see allowing erosion of trust in science in one area allows for erosion in science generally. It creates the narrative, just like you're saying, it changes all the time. Once you create the narratives for why you can dismiss science sometimes, you create the narrative that allows you to dismiss science any other time you want. And that, I think, is the real moral hazard of allowing these untruths to germinate, grow, spread, metastasize through our societies. And part of it is some people are definitely motivated by their own personal reasons, but for things to get really big and really infectious, you almost need an outside impetus to really push those things. So like when it comes to the denial of global warming, we know this is driven in a large part by fossil fuel companies, fossil fuel-based countries. Russia is basically a petrostate, and they also try to push climate change nonsense or anti-climate change information because it's like the only thing that keeps the lights on in Russia. And of course, ExxonMobil doesn't exactly like the idea of their company going away and their main source of money going away. And we know that, like, for example, the big oil producers in the US knew about climate change and being a significant hazard to basically the world, all the way back in the mid-late 20th century. So decades before Michael Mann goes in front of Congress and says, hey, here this NASA scientist is coming and saying, here's the issues we have with carbon dioxide. At least a decade before, multiple decades before, executives at the big companies were being told the same thing by their own scientists, and actually had projections that have proven to be reasonably accurate. Even though, like I said, they were making projections back in the 60s and 70s for nowadays, and their projections were pretty much on the money. Kind of amazing. And, well, did that make Chevron stop drilling? No. And we see that, companies like that, the Koch brothers and their monies and things like that, have gone to push the sorts of ideologies that would be best for their bottom line. And the narratives that those things create are also useful to other anti-science things. Probably the biggest line I have seen people use when it comes to anti-vaccine rhetoric is more libertarian kind of arguments about you being forced to be vaccinated, whether true or not. But that same sort of libertarian ideological reasoning is the thing pushed by the same think tanks that are funded by the Koch brothers and things like that, because their arguments are, well, we shouldn't be regulating this stuff because, well, you can't regulate the economy. That's bad for capitalism. And that same sort of thought process and that same sort of individualism against anything collective is then the same rhetoric going into vaccine stuff. So much the argument that scientists will give you for a reason to get vaccinated, even if you have a low risk of dying from these diseases, is, well, there's also the risk to the rest of the community. And when you ingest this very libertarian version of how science is supposed to work, and your response is the middle finger to the rest of society, how are we supposed to make good thoughts there? But fundamentally, I think might be the biggest problem is we've had a breakdown in trust in institutions generally.
Yeah.
Our politicians, our media, it's bleeding over to the sciences. Generally, it creates a way to erode trust in voices that usually should know better. And I think the best way to show how different things are now versus when my parents were, young, back in the 50s when they developed the polio virus, no, sorry, not the polio virus, the polio vaccine. Polio virus was around a little longer than that. But the first versions of the polio virus were coming out. I keep speaking, I'm sorry. The new, a version of the polio vaccine comes out and starts getting mass distribution. And there is some version of it that comes out and it's actually giving people polio and getting people hospitalized. There's this obviously scandalous event happening. This gets pulled back and they try to figure out what was the cause for why this version of the virus was not sufficiently attenuated. And I think it's a matter of weeks later that they say, all right, we have fixed the problem. Here's the new and improved version. What do people do? Do they say, nope, you've screwed up, we're never coming back? No, instead, people lined up because they said, you fixed the problem and I don't want my kids getting polio. All right, let's get those shots in arms.
Yeah.
That does not look like what we have now, because the same trust that Americans had in their institutions in the mid-20th century has eroded. Though I should also note, I should say trust in institutions by white people. I think African Americans had lots of reasons to not trust institutions at that time. And we know so much of why that is a justified belief.
Yeah, we fostered some of this distrust.
Yes.
And, it's easy to say, oh, the education system failed. I think we need massive improvements in our education system, but I'm no expert on it. I couldn't even tell you how it runs. I don't know enough about what they're actually doing now. I haven't been in school in ages, other than to stop and briefly lecture at a university. I couldn't tell you what's going on in high schools or anything else, other than when somebody, emails or writes in to say, here's what the potential issue is, or here's what's going on in my area. So I don't know what the quality of education is. I know that I'm a fairly sharp guy. I learn things fairly easily and fairly quickly. And yet I almost didn't graduate high school because I was bored out of my mind, skipping class, sleeping through, not doing homework assignments, because there was nothing to motivate me to give a shit about a number of things. It was like I could not grasp why this stuff mattered. I was, for a period of time, the exact same person that I'm very eager to complain about, the ones who are like, why do I need to do this stuff? I don't see the value in it. And then running around, doing their own research afterwards. Fortunately, near the end of my time there, and from that point on, something clicked and I became a sort of obsessive learner. And so I'm self-taught, and probably incorrectly, in a number of different areas. But to me, it seems like we used to have classes that taught people things about operating in their basic life, how to balance your checkbook, how to do stuff at home, what taxes do, why you need to pay them, what the rights in the government are, and the branches of government and all this. So you'd get a kind of a broad picture of the world. And I'm not convinced that that picture is there and that we are doing the things that encourage people to inspire the sort of desire for discovery and inquiry that we should. So I don't know if the education system has failed as much as we've failed to let people know the value of an education.
I'm pretty sure every educator will tell you there are things that we can improve on. And what's right or wrong, what's best there, that's beyond my ability to say, especially because a lot of it is certain political choices that I don't know enough of the knowledge of what would, quote unquote, be best, especially large-scale policies. My own experience of being a teacher in the high school and college level is putting in the right sort of pedagogy in that classroom and making things work and being attentive to those individual kids as much as possible. How to do things more globally at an administrative level and doing that better, I wish I had more insight to speak to that. But
we're going to...
In some ways, though, we are doing better in some ways. But I think there's also been a lot of reports about a lot of scores have dropped significantly since COVID, and how much of that is because of at-home learning versus other issues, to be determined. I wish I knew more.
Yeah, and it's all right. We've been at this for 40 minutes. I rambled for a while, but there's a lot here, and I think obviously I didn't think that Aaron and I were going to solve this tonight, but we kind of want to know what you guys think as well, and so. Get involved. I get that chat isn't necessarily the place to be having side discussions or offer anything else, but you can reach out to the line. You can also, now we're not just going to take calls with everybody speculating on stuff, because as always, theistic callers are going to get priority here on any show that I do. We'll be happy to take calls about theism, about the supernatural, but also you're in a great position, because if you have science related questions, I mean, you can treat this a little bit like it's a bonus episode of Skeptalk. If you have concerns or thoughts about, hey, what scientific journals would somebody recommend on different subjects? How do you figure out which ones to pay attention to? It's not just, hey, how do I learn what the proper statistical methodologies are for a particular subject? That can be overwhelming. But if I'm going to be stuck in a position where I just need to figure out who to trust, is it probably just best to trust the broad consensus and proportion your confidence both to the available evidence and your understanding of it? Like, for example, I don't have a position on quantum mechanics because I don't know enough about it to distinguish it from pure fucking magic in some instances. And there are aspects of various sciences that may or may not be testable, but I don't understand them enough to know. And by and large, most of the details of them don't impact how I'm going to live my daily life. I still want to know because I want to know things. But right now, with 20 other things on fire, maybe I don't need to start studying quantum mechanics right now. But somebody probably should, because if we survive the upcoming disasters and wars and climate change and all of this stuff, it might be nice to move the human species further towards an accurate model of reality. While we were here talking about it, I noticed something that somebody mentioned something in chat, and I went and looked it up to verify. This has nothing to do with education. So I want to say this, and then we're going to move on to calls. Most of us already know that Stephen Colbert was canceled. He's going to get to finish out his run, but he's canceled. ABC just announced, I think it was ABC, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. ABC just announced that they've suspended Jimmy Kimmel indefinitely over comments related to Charlie Kirk. Meanwhile, President Trump has announced that he's looking into the possibility of declaring left, it's all kind of vague, but left stuff to be hate speech that they're going to shut down and potentially prosecute. And when someone showed him a pride flag and they told him what it was and asked him if he would ban that sort of thing, he seemed to suggest, hey, yeah, we'll look into that as well. We may just go ahead and say that this group that we're already trying to vilify, these trans folks, these queer folks, whatever, they are so violent that we're just going to designate them all as a hate group. Your free speech is being taken away. This show is 100% at risk. We do this show and everything on the line right here on YouTube. We don't have any control over what YouTube does. YouTube could knock us off the air tomorrow. They could stop paying us. They could do any number of things. They could keep all the money you donate. And that's why we have spread out some of the interest on this show so that if things go awry, we may have other options. I hope that they don't. But I just did a live stream on my channel, my personal channel, yesterday, saying that free speech is dying. And it absolutely is. It is bizarre that the death of a free speech warrior who says there's no such thing as hate speech and all speech is protected is being used to silence dissenters, is being used to shut down speech. And Musk, who was so proud to say that, comedy is legal again, who's getting canceled? From the people opposed to cancel culture and wanted to make comedy legal, who's getting canceled? It's Stephen Colbert, it's Jimmy Kimmel, it's the comedians. It won't be long before they take out Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon and anybody else, because late night TV needs to be about as boring as possible. Because as long as it's boring, you're not paying attention to what's going on. It is bizarre to me, the world we live in. It is like, I didn't even want to talk about any of the side stuff tonight because but it never ends. I mentioned today to somebody, they're like, oh, we just need to all realize that we're a bird and there's a right wing and a left wing and we need to cooperate. No, the Constitution is not a fucking bird. It doesn't have a right wing or a left wing. It doesn't designate wings or parties. It describes liberties and freedoms and the responsibilities and duties of the government. And there's one group of people who are standing in opposition to that. They're standing in opposition to due process, to the rule of law, and they are using and weaponizing the political system where they've stuck in all of their unqualified or underqualified cronies all over the place. They're ignoring court orders where they can. And prosecuting people left and right who are their political enemies. And now they're basically just saying, hey, all you queer folks, you lefty folks, we're just going to start declaring you guys hate groups. We're going to shut down your shows. We're going to take away the free speech. I don't know how far they can actually go, but how far they've gone already is absolutely terrifying. Because I get it. I already mentioned Hitler earlier today. And I'm loath to make these examples. When I worry about how they're going to be misrepresented, but it doesn't matter to me anymore. No matter how good we are at representing the truth, no matter how diligent we are about saying things, it's misrepresented. It's taken the wrong way. It's lied about. I've denounced violence for political speech consistently for 20 some odd years. And when I said that I did not have sympathy for Charlie Kirk, and then went on to explain how much this hurt me, that as a humanist, someone could get slaughtered, and I could recognize that it was unjust, and still not have sympathy for that person, That bothered me. And that was the point. And I still have sympathy for others. But as soon as I said zero sympathy, there were like 6 or 8 people. But still, it annoys me that they were like, oh, you're terrible. You're vile. What you just said is worse than anything Charlie Kirk's ever said. Are you kidding me? The guy who said that if his 10-year-old was the victim of a sexual assault and became pregnant, he would force her to carry the child to term. You think what I said is worse than that? I mean, I have sympathy for his kids just for being his kids, but I definitely have sympathy for anybody whose parent would force them to carry a baby to term after being sexually assaulted at age 10. I mean, no matter where you stand on abortion, with the exception of the people who make no exceptions, can we at least recognize this is not in the best health interest of your 10-year-old? And the very notion that we live in a society where one person can do this to their kid, I view it personally as child abuse. If you want to have that debate, we can. I think it's a terrible world where a parent can force that upon their child. I think those children are citizens and we have a duty to them as well. But those are conversations that we can have as long as we're able to actually talk about them. People came to me and they're like, oh, Charlie Kirk, he's a champion of exchange of public ideas. No, he's not. Well, he's not anything now, but he wasn't. Look at what happened right before the shooting. Hey, do you know how many trans shootings there were? Too many. Mic down. Hey, do you know how many mass shootings there were? Are you counting gang violence or not? Mic down. Both of those are applause lines. Both of those are hello Cleveland lines. Both of those, but what I mean by that is if you're a rock band, what's the easiest way to get the crowd riled up? You say, hello Pittsburgh, or wherever you are, and they all go nuts. And they go nuts for no reason. There's no substance to what you said. It's just, hooray, we're on the same team. And from the standpoint of debating, that is incredibly dishonest because you're not honestly engaging with your interlocutor. And you are poisoning the well of how that person's words are going to be received by the audience. Because if you know that you've got the audience and you say too many and the crowd goes nuts, they're already dismissing the person. And when you pile on another dog whistle, they're going to continue dismissing. And the people out there that are sitting maybe on the fence that are like, ooh, I don't know what I think about all this gun violence or anything else. They're now more afraid to speak out or show support for the person who they might actually agree with. It is dishonest. It is playing at debate. It is playing at the share of ideas. And by the way, stuff like that happens here. I've never claimed this is remotely a fair forum. We try to make it as fair as possible, but you get trolls and you're constantly under attack. But I also go out and do debates. And yes, I know Charlie went out and did debates as well. But if you can't have the conversation, if you can't say, I think you're vile for saying this, where are we? And it's funny to me that the people on the right who we already have data to show, even though they're scrubbing it, are more likely to lean towards violence. The people on the right who are, what is it? I'd like for somebody to call in and tell me what us lefties, to whatever extent I am or Aaron is or anybody is, what is it we're advocating for that makes the world worse? Because I think it makes the world worse when you force babies to have babies. I think it makes the world worse when you tell 3 highly qualified Black women that they're not smart enough to be taken seriously. I think it makes the world worse when you go from being a secularist who supports church-state separation, a separation between religion and government, to being a Zionist Christian nationalist supporting Project 2025 and an end to church-state separation. I think those things make the world worse. You may think they make them better, but I'd also ask you, do you think they make them better for you or for everybody? Because I'm trying to make the world better for everybody, or as many people as we can. I'm not the one advocating for an elimination of any group of people. And yet the people on the right have taken trans folks who represent less than 1% of the population and turned them into a boogeyman, talking in terms of these people are lunatics, they need to be exterminated. And it is terrifying. And while I said I'm loath to make this example, if you go back, a current government is taking a marginalized minority that a lot of people can't connect with, don't feel close to, and do not understand, and vilifying them and turning them into a boogeyman to excuse their takeover of everything. As they fill their coffers with billions of dollars, as they build a new ballroom. When Trump was asked, how you holding up? Your friend Charlie Kirk was killed. And how you holding up? And Trump's like, I think I'm doing pretty good. By the way, did you see the trucks? It was almost that fast. Like I might be a half a second faster. By the way, did you see the trucks over there? They're starting work on the new ballroom. We've been wanting this ballroom forever. Nobody wants a fucking ballroom. I don't care who pays for it. I don't care how you pay. I don't care if you paid for it out of your own billions that you're siphoning off of stuff. Nobody wanted a ballroom. And while the president is the one who announces that Charlie Kirk is dead and announces that his killer is in custody, when he was asked about Melissa Hortman, the Minnesota senator who was assassinated, he said, who? Don't pretend like we're the ones that are deficient in compassion. There are problems on both sides, but they're not the same problems and not to the same extent. There's violence on both sides. And I denounce all of it. But if you genuinely think that the people on the left are trying to make a worse world for everybody, I'd love you to explain how. What is it about the world that I want that is worse for everybody? Because I can tell you the aspects of the world they want that I object to because they're not good for everybody. But, all right, that was an extra rant, but we have calls. And all of them actually relate to the subject. So here we go. Lindsay is a theist calling from Colorado, pronouns she, her. Lindsay says, why would you need something out of the Bible to know it's true? Hey, Lindsay, how are you? You're on with Aaron and Matt.
I am here on the earth is how I'm doing. I am
believe
alive,
you.
Which is good. I heard your discussion and oh my gosh, I've got points. But I guess I'm somewhat of deconstructing my faith, and so currently I believe that the Old Testament, at least, is mythology. That totally makes sense. I've yet to figure out Jesus, etc. But I don't know why I don't understand this, but maybe either of you can talk it out with me. Because I've kept hearing lots of people say, okay, if you don't have proof, regarding the Bible or whatever, how do you know it's true? Well, it's in the Bible. And so I went ahead and talked to the screener beforehand, and I said, okay, if you don't know a word, you look it up in the dictionary.
Okay.
How is that different?
Well, I definitely want to get Aaron's thoughts on this, but I will say my take on dictionaries. Dictionaries are not authorities on meaning. Dictionaries describe how words are used, and words can be used in a lot of different ways. And so if you're reading something, you come across a word that you don't know, you look up in a dictionary because you're trying to find out the different ways in which it's used and then figure out which one is most likely in that circumstance. Sometimes it's really easy. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a little more complicated, and it gets more complicated when we start talking about the Bible, which Aaron also has expertise there as well, because you're talking about something that's written in a language that has changed or died off. Right, exactly. And so in my case, when I'm doing the studying here, I've showed this before. I don't even know if my screen, yeah, here we go. Arden, if you can put me full screen real quick. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. So assuming you can see this, what I have here is E-Sword. You can get it at e-sword.net. These are all the different versions of the Bible that are available on here. So like this is the King James Plus. And if you're looking at Genesis 1:1, you can see that where it says in the beginning, there's a little note right there. That is H7225. And in Hebrew, that's Reshith. And it gives you usages and it shows you how many times it occurs. So when you're going through something like the Bible and something has been translated, you want this so that you can get back to the original as close
Mhm.
as you can so that you can make sure that you're not viewing something and injecting the bias of others or the bias of new understandings. That's not
Right.
always
Okay.
easy, but for the most part, to me, it becomes the Bible makes a claim. Doesn't matter what language it's in.
Mhm.
Any book makes a claim. Doesn't matter what language it's in. Define the claim and then determine how you would figure out if it's true or not. And there are plenty of things in the Bible that are true. It's
Mhm.
just, it relies on the general tone and the fact that some of those things are true, in my view, to bolster up claims that are much more dubious. Like,
Okay.
I agree there is an earth and that the earth has land and water. I don't agree that
Mhm.
the land and water were divided by a God.
Okay.
And how would we show that's true? The time to believe it is after we have some way of showing that it's true.
Okay. So I've got ADHD, so maybe my sticking points aren't sticking, or I've got more questions. Anyway,
No, go for it.
so when you said you find a source and then you figure out what's true, that for me is overwhelming. That's just like, what do you mean find out it's true? It's kind of like how my dad is a retired history teacher. He tried to teach philosophy. He said it was hard. And I asked what philosophy is. He pointed to a table and he said, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a table." He's like, "How do you know it's a table?" I'm like, "I could see it." He's like, "Cool. What else?" I'm like, "Oh, well, that's just really hard." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, it describes how people think, I guess. It was a bad analogy, I guess, according to my friends. My
No,
friend Jazz was like, no, that's a really bad example. You don't do a gotcha when you're trying to figure out philosophy. And I'm like, okay, I still don't understand it.
It
But
depends
anyway.
on the teacher. When I
yeah.
read Plato and see the character Socrates in there, it feels like thousands
Mhm.
of pages of gotcha.
Yeah.
Part of the process of philosophy, especially in those dialogues, is working through your thought process and realizing, oh, this belief I have runs counter to this belief I have. How am I supposed to reconcile them? How does one overcome the other? What's my new position after doing this? And how many more times am I going to have to do this? And of course, given your finite lifetime, you're probably not going to finish.
Right. Okay. So it's just like thought experiments, basically, but with really smart people. I don't know.
I,
Sorry, the general
I hate the
idea of
idea.
philosophy.
I hate the idea that philosophy is only the domain of smart people because everyone has
Right.
a philosophy. Everyone believes things, and the only question is, are you believing for good, well thought out reasons or not? Everyone
Yeah.
can have good reasons for things, and really smart people can believe things for really bad reasons, or become really
Okay.
smart and use their intelligence to defend the indefensible because it preserves some other important belief for them. So do not just
Gotcha.
surrender over philosophy to the philosophers. And not to mention, the philosophers would love it if you go and buy their books. They're adjunct professors. They need as much money as they can to survive with the rents these
Yeah.
days.
I also
Yeah.
need to
Okay.
retract something really quickly because you called me out on saying, how do you tell if something's true? I used it in a colloquial sense because here's a philosophical conundrum for you. Whether or not we have access to truth at all is an open question. And so
Oh,
when
okay.
we say, is this true? I think most
You're
frequently
using
what we
it in the
mean is no, because
scientific
science doesn't make
definition.
proclamations of truth. All it's saying is
You
this
get a
is our
point.
best current model of
Yeah, yeah.
that is
It's
consistent with the available facts.
it's the
So
theory. Yes.
when I use it, I'm saying, do we have a good? We may not know. I don't think we have absolute certainty about anything. We may not be able to identify truth, but do we have a reasonable justification, given the facts of the world and our known limitations, to accept that this is probably true?
Okay.
That's I think as close as we can get. And so when somebody says, "Hey, aliens abducted me last night," um, that claim is different from, "Hey, I got a new puppy last night." And the facts
Right.
of reality I already have a good understanding about puppies and people getting puppies as a pet. And I think, I know something, maybe whether or not how much I trust the person or not. And I might say that's reasonable to accept just on its face. If I don't know anything about the person and I don't have evidence sufficient to conclude that alien abductions are possible or likely, now all of a sudden what I'm doing is saying, okay, there's a mountain. It's not that one claim needs more evidence than the other. It's that the claim that you got a pet dog is already supported by a huge mountain of evidence that does not exist.
Right, exactly.
And so
For the
that's the
alien
one that's
abduction. Yeah, gotcha. Okay. That makes more sense. Thank you. Because my brain is like, what the hell am I missing? Okay. So you just went ahead and said, I'm going to look outside of the Bible to see if this is, to see if the claim is based on actual evidence outside of what this book is telling me, right? I mean, I've heard a little bit about your story, Matt, so I understand where you kind of came from, and you're like, well, I wanted to be the best Christian, so I dug into the research and listened to the experts, and then I went, oh, okay. So
the whole question was, do I have good reason to believe this is probably true? And is my justification for accepting it sufficient that it should convince others? And if not, why does it convince me? Why is it that I'm convinced? And we hear this all the time from people who are like, oh, I know that God's real, but I couldn't demonstrate to you. Okay, well, can you provide me evidence? Right? Yeah, but my evidence won't convince you. And my question is, then why does it convince you? What is different about your assessment of the information? Because that should at least be teachable, I would think. And you'll see most of the conversations get back to this. The only appearingly strong fallback hold is to rely on personal experience. Because Lindsay, I guarantee you, I know more about how hungry I am or I'm not than you do.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's probably true for the neurologist that's going to scan my brain, in a week or so. We may get to a point where we can quantify exactly how hungry I am and measure it from, across town. And then they'll just automatically ship me the food or whatever. I don't, I'm in science fiction realm, but we know more about what we directly experience, and we are stuck. Like, for example, to dig back into philosophy, everything I know about you comes from my personal experience. How do I know you're real? How do I know that reality is real? How do I know that this conversation isn't just a delusion in my brain? And the answer is,
stop it.
I don't.
That just makes my brain hurt. What are you doing? Okay.
I'm not, I promise I'm not trying to make you anxious.
No, it's just a bad analogy of and then I go to the bad conclusion of schizophrenia, and I'm like, no, that's totally different. Arg.
No. The point is, you cannot reach a conclusion to say, yes, I can be absolutely certain that the reality I experience is real. But within the realm of this reality that apparently you and I share, we can independently.
Going back to gotcha.
Independently, we can verify whether or not, if you and me and Aaron are sitting in a room, and I say, wow, what's that? And you both look and you say, what are you talking about? I'm like, there's a figure standing right there glowing, and neither of you see it. Does that mean I'm wrong? No. But does it mean that I have reasonable warrant to suspect that I could be wrong? Yeah. This is why science relies on independent verification and attestation, and it's always an attempt to falsify. Skepticism isn't about proving things wrong. It's about trying to demonstrate that they're true and then either succeeding or failing. And true, I'm still using the colloquial.
No, colloquial. Yeah, I gotcha. I've been listening to Forrest Balkai quite a lot, and he's helped me with the evolution thing. And I've called in a couple of times with that, and I'm just like, how did the platypus? And then he's like, here, let's think about it and give the 3 definitions of the mammal. And I'm like, kangaroo, what? Yeah. Then from Aaron Raw, he's amazing, and I feel overwhelmed when I'm listening to him because he knows a heck of a lot more of evolution than I do, and he can just spout off the word like basal mammal, and I'm like, how is that related to basil? But then I'm like, oh, that's a different word.
Well, no offense to
Not-
either one of
not
them.
the
They are
spice.
both my friends, and they're both my friends, and they're both brilliant. But Eric is smarter than both of them. So I like to get that in because I just love listening to Erica talk about it. Now, her and Forrest both have this joy that is overwhelming about the fields that they are absolutely obsessed with. And I love listening to both of them. But I just want to make sure we don't leave out my favorite, my personal favorite. But all right, what other question you got, Lindsay? Because we might have to move on soon. And I didn't know if Aaron had thoughts on that verification
Aaron,
stuff
did
either.
you have any thoughts on what I was thinking about?
I'm going to go quick with it because I think Matt covered a whole lot that's awesome. But since you specifically called in saying how are you supposed to like verify stuff related to the New Testament, I'll just give you some quick things there. So I'm thinking of this in terms of a historian. So what things do we see in the gospel stories? Can we actually verify historically? And even if you want to just stay within the gospels, there are issues. Like we actually don't know who wrote any of them. The names are only attributed to them many decades later. Basically, we only have confirmed names for these gospels at the end of the 2nd century. So like 150 years after JC is when we have named documents talking about these things.
Right.
Also, we can tell that, for example, the Gospels of...
Oh, I was just going to say that the Gospels in the New Testament are more Americanized names than like Habakkuk. It sounds very foreign in my mouth.
Yeah, that's...
So anyway.
Yeah, that's mostly because, there's lots of people who've taken up these names that were, originally Jewish names, then in Greek, then translated or transferred to Latin, that then entered English.
Yeah.
So John comes from Johannes, which actually comes from Yohanan. So it's got a long history, but nonetheless, we don't know who wrote these books. We can also tell they're actually riffing off each other. We know pretty confidently that Matthew and Luke, those gospels, were using Mark as a source because there's a lot of like exact word agreement. So these people aren't witnesses to these things. We can see that they're copy pasting and then editing from each other. And they tell stories that actually don't mesh well together. Let me just give you one example. Both the Gospel of Matthew and Luke describe Mary having a miraculous encounter to become pregnant and to give birth to Jesus as the Son of God. Now, Mary actually gets told literally by an archangel that you are going to have given birth to the Son of God. And of course, all these other things that happen in the birth stories, which are pretty memorable. Luke 2 even says, like, Mary held all these things in her heart. And yet, in Mark 6, when Jesus is first out in his ministry, Mary and her family come out and say, Jesus has gone crazy. Is that what you'd expect if Mary literally was told by the angel that basically is by God saying you are going to give birth to God's son? You're going to think, oh, he's actually out of his mind? That isn't what you would expect, but it's the sort of thing you would expect if Mark is writing before anyone ever even came up with the story of the virgin birth. So even within the Gospels themselves, you can find tensions like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was gonna say, maybe one time Mary said something to Jesus, and then for whatever reason it stuck for so long, and then I'm like, well, no, that would just need to be daily. So yeah, it makes sense. It was vice versa. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I will contemplate that.
Yeah, there's, even though the Gospels are relatively short, there's a lot to think about, and that's the only reason I can keep studying them myself for my own academic research.
Okay, cool.
And how wild is it that you go read a science book or even the average science paper has more detail and is probably longer than most of the New Testament books, because most of them were letters. This is Paul's epistle to, you know. Yeah. And so somebody compiled a bunch of letters.
Yeah.
If God had an important message for
some
us,
reason. Yeah.
Yeah, if God had an important message for us, I don't know why he'd inspire a bunch of letters over a long period of time and then tell people which ones to collect without any sort of justification for why some letters are okay and some aren't, other than their opinion and the fact that churches fought over this stuff. And to the victor goes the Bible. But
Yeah, exactly.
anyway,
Much
I got to
like
move
history.
on, Lindsay, but I appreciate the call. Keep asking questions.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Good night.
I got an update. We're going to get to more calls. We've got a couple atheists that you're going to go last probably, but there's a theist coming up saying Trump's not destroying the sciences, and they'll explain why. So that's cool. There's also somebody calling about vaccine skepticism. But I wanted to say that the update that we just got on Jimmy Kimmel is that this was a direct result of the FCC. That's a government agency, the Federal Communications Commission. And the report coming in says the suspension comes after Federal Communication Commission Chairman Brendan Carr issued a threat to Kimmel on the Benny Johnson show, teasing avenues the FCC could pursue. And the quote is, "Look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way." No, that doesn't sound gangster as fuck, but we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. So this threat from the FCC, this threat from the United States government to a network allowing a comedian to say things that people might find offensive, is what resulted in him getting canceled. Don't come pretending that the right's the ones, they're so opposed to cancel culture. This is fascist takeover of the airways. That's exactly what this is. This is controlling speech. And there's no reason to think it's going to end anytime soon. So let's get some calls and see if we can't have some good discussions before it's all over.
Mm-hmm.
Nelson, pronounce him in New Jersey. Thanks for calling, Nelson. You're saying Trump's not destroying the sciences, and you can explain why. So welcome. You're on with Dr. Aaron Adair and this asshole.
God damn it. This is one of those days where I kind of regret taking the position I took. So I'm just gonna wave the white flag. Have a good
Okay.
night.
Good night. I'm confused by that. I mean, this is one of those nights where I regret taking the position I took. I don't take positions as a point of strategy. I'm either convinced that something is real and true or not. I have thoughts about strategy. Like, for example, there are some things that you can say that are clickbaity and draw people in. I have thoughts about how to put a narrative together. Like, I knew I was going to talk about the 9 out of 10 dentist thing at some point, and I almost put it in at the beginning so that I could do a callback to it later. But because I had a health scare on Sunday, I wanted to address that, and it changed the form. But when I say, zero sympathy, I know that some people are going to misunderstand that. And then the question then becomes, did you really think that I'm saying I no longer have any sympathy for anyone about anything anywhere? Because that's really absurd. And by the way, if I post something that just says 2 words, zero sympathy, how did you even know that it was about Charlie Kirk? And if you knew it was about Charlie Kirk and you knew that it didn't apply to other things, then why are you pretending like it applied to other things instead of what you inferred that it applied to? There are strategy things. For example, there's a lot of people. I've made a mistake already this week. There we go. Let me correct my mistake. The first words were that this was trans violence, this is left violence, before they had any suspect, when they had somebody else entirely in custody. And Laura Loomer and others are calling, the Democrats, or Nancy Mace, I think it was the Democrats on this, but Laura Loomer did something similar. And then when they found out that it was a 20-something white, Republican-raised Mormon kid, all of a sudden they started walking it back, and they went from this is civil war to we know that Charlie Kirk would want us to have Jesus help this guy. Literally, those is posts from the same person. I'm paraphrasing, but I don't think I'm misrepresenting anybody. And then information started coming out about Groyper. I had never even heard the term Groyper, and evidently it is a subset of internet culture that is, I'm going to get some of this wrong, that are Nick Fuentes fans and really don't like Charlie Kirk because they think he's a sellout that isn't far right enough. And this was because some of the things that he scratched on the bullets were messages that are used in that community. Kind of like, is it 4chan or whatever that has the what's the frog and the chat and all that? Anyway, these little icons, all these little inside jokes and memes on there. And so it's like you're saying one thing, but you definitely mean another, but your inside group knows it's there. And so there was all this confusion and people were getting it wrong. And I warned everybody and then did not take my own advice. I almost never go on Twitter anymore, but I went on there because somebody tagged me and said that I was responsible for this because despite the fact that I constantly denounce violence and have lost friends over whether or not it's justified to punch Nazis, they're like, rhetoric like Matt Dilahunty is what's leading people to take these actions. And I was like, you don't get to blame me for your right on right crime. And it was, at that moment, that was the best new information that we had. And I shouldn't have said it because there's always more to go. And then the message starts coming out that, he had been recently radicalized to the left and had a trans partner, romantic partner. And so now they went from the shooter's trans to the bullets are trans to his partner's trans. And they're just finding, some way. And it's really irritating. And the truth is, what we know about the accused shooter who is in custody is we know who that person is, but we don't yet have good details on how or why. There is supposedly a text chain, and some people are like, on the right and on the left are like, this thing reads like a script of admission. It doesn't read like a real text chain between these two people. And my thought is, please don't go down that conspiracy theory road, because both of the people who are supposedly in that text chain are currently alive. And it would be very easy for them to say, that's not real. That's not what was said. This is manufactured. Now, how and when that might happen, maybe they're lawyering up right now and finding a spokesperson to say that. The point is, right now, nobody knows necessarily who did it or why. We have some suspicions, but part of this, if you watch Kash Patel being interviewed by Congress this week, this is a podcaster who's completely unhinged and unqualified to be the director of the FBI. And when you have biases and sloppiness, right now there's no good information that anybody should be banking on. And so it was a mistake for me to necessarily call it right on right crime, just like it was a mistake for them to call it trans stuff. I did it in one place real quickly in a retaliation to somebody attacking me and accusing me of being responsible, and I ended up deleting it and regretting it. Why? Because I actually give a fuck about the truth. Unlike some people, if I'm going to misrepresent something, I'm going to try and fix it. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, it's in my notes to talk about the end of the show, but I'll do it now. I don't know what sent me off on that tangent, but we have other calls. I was saying, I don't understand somebody when they say, I'm sorry I picked that position, because I don't pick my beliefs. It sounded like, Aaron, am I wrong? Did it sound like he was calling in because he wanted to argue with something about it? And he picked, do you think he was regretting the fact that he chose that specific topic, or that he chose to try to defend that version? I don't know. We could have asked, I guess. I shouldn't ask you to speculate, but
yeah. I will speculate quickly, just because he was also calling in rather giggly. It feels like someone who wanted to be a contrarian, and then I guess realized how absurd his position was going to be when he's going to argue with a quote-unquote science guy about taking away money from science actually makes it better.
I'm going to respond to somebody in chat real quick.
There is a science communicator who does believe that's the case. It was one of the relatively recent videos from Sabina Hausfelder. That she's somehow
Yeah,
saying, oh, yeah, these cuts of like 50% from NASA, oh, this will actually make American science better. It's like, yeah, when has defunding cancer research increased the rate of progress?
So I'm going to respond to somebody in chat who evidently didn't want to call in. And they said, Matt, was it not about Charlie Kirk? Yes, it was. They're talking about my post that said zero sympathy. Not that you give a rat's ass what I say, but I do disagree with your zero sympathy comment. I think we can still have sympathy at the same time standing up against, hey, as I've explained, 20 times, you can't disagree with something if you're fucking wrong about what it meant. At no point did I say we couldn't have sympathy. At no point did I say we shouldn't have sympathy. I said in this specific instance for this person, I was unable to muster empathy, and that made me miserable that they had driven me to the point where I couldn't muster. I'm thrilled that there were people who were capable of being sympathetic. If only people could actually stop reading into what I said based on their own biases and then attributing that to me. Stop pretending you understood what I said when you fucking didn't. Even after I clarified it over and over for a week, at no point did I celebrate the violence. At no point did I say you shouldn't have sympathy. As a matter of fact, I've said the opposite, that there are people who are better than me, who were capable of mustering sympathy, and there were other people who are worse than me that were dancing and celebrating. I was talking about how I felt, not making a declaration about what was right or what ought to be. You are injecting your own perspective on this and doing it despite the fact, Johnny Burke, that I've clarified this like 50 fucking times this week because a whole bunch of people decided, ooh, I know what that means, and you didn't. Well, that's your fault. You misspoke. Okay. If you think I misspoke, cool. How many times do I have to clarify it before you'll stop pretending you understood it? Suck on that one, Johnny. Sorry, that was a bit of a fun line there because I'm actually not mad because there were other people that were that way, but it's like frustrating to be like, you said this. You said nobody should have sympathy. No, I'm a humanist as opposed to violence. I was lamenting a word that people should use more and maybe go look up. I was lamenting the fact that I wanted to feel sympathy and didn't. I still had sympathy for his kids. I had sympathy for the minds he reached. I had sympathy for the world we live in across the board. I talked about one thing. That's all right. I'm done clarifying it. Anybody who gets it wrong now, good for you. All right. Tim's calling from New York. Tim's a deist, and he doesn't know why, and I don't know why. Pronouns are he, him. I'm teasing you, Tim. He said he'd like to speak about vaccine skepticism and censorship by employers. So, Tim, you're on with Dr. Aaron Adair.
Oh, yes, sir. So I wanted to speak about vaccines skepticism. Like I said, I think that it's normal and healthy to have skepticism, especially over a vaccine that had only had a few months or a year of trials.
Hey, Tim, what is skepticism?
Skepticism is thinking critically about just what might happen.
Yeah. I'll shut up. Aaron doesn't need me chiming in on this at all. But I'll say that I'm a skeptic, and I'm a skeptic about everything. When I talk about vaccine deniers and vaccine skeptics, I'm putting skeptic in air quotes because they're not being skeptics, they're being cynics. But I'm out of it.
Okay.
I guess I'll just follow up there. So, Tim, when you're saying that because there was only a couple months, that means what? That the data is fake, that it's not reliably gathered? By saying that the demonstration of its efficacy and safety was done quickly, in what way you're saying that shows that we should not trust it?
We didn't have long-term data on the side effects 5-10 years down the road, so how can we know for sure whether it's safe at that point?
So here's the thing. I mentioned this earlier about the difference between hazards and risks. In this case, this is not even a risk. This is a hypothetical hazard. And we can only go ultimately by what is the things we know and what's our background knowledge. Now, in particular, on background knowledge, we have centuries of research on inoculation, about a century of research on vaccines. We understand the mechanisms of these things at a biomechanical level very well. So we would have already reason to doubt that this sort of vaccine would have some sort of new unfound side effect that only shows up 10 years later. So why would we dismiss all that background knowledge and say, because we don't have 10 years of research on this, therefore we should assume that there is something we need to worry about?
Well, as far as I know, and I do not claim to be an expert, the technology for these RNA vaccines is a bit different than the typical inoculation that we've dealt with in the past.
It's a new technology, but mRNA technology itself has actually been around for a couple of decades.
And do you think we had significant or sufficient data to absolutely know? I mean, we're giving this to almost every person.
Don't ever use the word absolute when it comes to science. That we can never be. And if you want absolute certainty before doing anything, I don't even know how you get out of bed, because you cannot be absolutely sure that you're not going to step on something sharp and get infected and then have that kill you. You can't be absolutely sure that won't happen, but you say that's too low probability to worry about that and never get out of bed.
Well, there were some side effects, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't there irregular heartbeat in some people?
Always go by comparison. So there are some side effects, because there almost always is. And the question is this: what's the severity? What is the probability? How does it compare to not getting the vaccine? And in particular, when it came to my understanding of things like arrhythmias, I'm not an expert in the medicine here, so I can only talk about things very second-handedly. But my understanding is any of those symptoms about arrhythmias were still significantly less severe than the actual COVID virus infection and then the syndrome you get from that. So if one of these things is going to say, again, I don't know the numbers here, but let's say it increases your heart rate 5 beats per minute, but COVID does 20 extra beats per minute, you would still say, hey, this vaccine is causing this side effect, but it's hella better than the disease. And again, I don't know the numbers, but my understanding is that even in those cases where there was that kind of effect, it was still far better than getting the virus itself. And I don't want to speak too much about the details without looking into more than that.
Well, as someone who first I had COVID, and then later I did get the vaccine because life. There were mandates for certain things. College. Do you think people should be mandated to get a vaccine so fresh?
What does the freshness have to do with anything? The question is efficacy. And the fact of the matter is, it's a transmittable disease. By you not getting the vaccine, you put other people at risk.
Is that a bodily autonomy issue?
If you put me at risk, you're putting other people's bodily autonomy at risk. This is the fact of the matter. When you have a communicable disease, you have to think about it as a community issue. And if you say that your body fuck everyone else's bodies, that is going to basically be the detriment of actually dealing with things that affect more than just individuals. But I see a hand going up from our Steam host.
Real quick on the bodily autonomy issue. Vaccine mandates, you're not required to get vaccinated. You're required to get vaccinated in order to interact with others in certain situations. You can refuse the vaccine and keep your ass at home. The mandate is about not only building herd immunity and trying to encourage that, but to make sure that people aren't putting others at risk in the performance of their regular duties. Oh, but you say, I might lose my job over it. Yeah, sorry, because it's about risk analysis. And I was here weekly during COVID, putting up data showing the number of deaths, the number of cases, all of this stuff regularly, having doctors in to talk about the vaccines and everything else. Tim, do you think that the COVID vaccine more likely helped more people stay alive or more likely killed more people?
I think it extended the life of a good number of people, particularly elderly people.
Is that a good thing? Is that a good thing to extend life?
It can be. Yeah, usually, generally, yes.
Sure. I agree there are some circumstances. Stop, Tim, stop. I agree there are some circumstances where extending someone's life can be cruel. But by and large, do you think that the vaccine was a positive for the world? I should say vaccines.
I don't know the answer.
Cool. Then what's your problem? Why aren't you out studying and looking at the research to say, hey, was this a positive or not? Why aren't you going out and investigating? Because what you're doing is calling us to cast aspersions on something because you find it dubious. Well, the data show that it was beneficial. The data show nothing is perfect, nothing is absolute, but the data show that it was a beneficial thing. What is your problem? What is your concern? Because you don't know whether it was a beneficial thing or not, and yet you're calling in to ask about it. I don't understand what your concern is, because it doesn't seem like you know enough to even have a concern.
Well, my biggest concern is, what if down the line they want to tell us, the government wants to tell us to get some vaccine, and it's bad. It sterilizes you or something like that.
Okay.
If you're saying that we develop a vaccine that has extremely terrible side effects, okay, I can see that being an issue. But here's the thing. Again, how long have we been inoculating people? As I mentioned, centuries. How long have we been using vaccines of some sort or other? About a century. So when you bring up this hypothetical that would actually go contrary to what we have seen vaccines do in hundreds of millions of doses over decades and decades and decades, I would say that the hazard possibility that you were talking about, the risk that would happen from such a thing, is made extremely low. And to basically say we should not have people get vaccines now because of something you could imagine that goes contrary to otherwise all of our background knowledge is a great way to make sure that we keep getting sick. And for ultimately no good evidence-based reason.
You're suggesting a scenario where the government creates a vaccine that's bad and forces you to get it. Were these vaccines created by one government?
No, but they were created by
no. Don't put a but on it. Don't put a but on it, Tim. Don't put a but on it. This is really easy. The answer is no. Were these vaccines a joint effort by responsible scientists and vetted to the best of their capability in an international effort to help the world?
And for money.
You know what, Tim? I no longer care to talk to you. Aaron can talk to you as much as he wants, because I'm sitting here happily guiding you towards the realization that you're inventing fears in order to dismiss something. And I was getting ready to explain to you that in this case, we operated on the best available information that we had at the time. You instead are inventing other things in order to denounce. I'm not even sure what your goal is with this, but when I lead you right up to the edge of where you would have to admit Oh, I see. If the government created a vaccine to sterilize all of us, it wouldn't even be comparable to what happened in this particular scenario. Oh, I understand herd immunity, and I understand that as someone who wants to interact with other people, I have a duty and a responsibility to my fellow human and not put them at risk if at all possible. So now I understand vaccine mandates a little bit better. But you, instead of answering the question honestly, decided to go, and for money. Well, never mind. Like I said, I don't care to talk to you about this anymore, Tim. Thanks. But Aaron might. I'm not shutting anything down. I'm just saying I'm tired of working to make something clear and try to help and have whatever conspiracy theory fiction you're inventing in your head override it to ignore the question you were asked and answer with something irrelevant. You think that Do you think COVID was intentionally created so that those people could make money?
No, I definitely don't have.
No. Cool.
No, I don't
cool.
have any information.
Then what's wrong? Then what's wrong with someone saying, "Wow, millions of people are at risk of dying. I'm going to do something that helps them, and I'll get rich." What's wrong with that?
I mean, definitely not on its face. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, then why did you bring up that their other motive was to make money? Why did you raise that? Why did you avoid my question? And now I've had to lead you back around to admit that what you said before was completely irrelevant. Can we at least stay on target, Tim?
Why did I mention? I just think you should know that there are other potential motivations. I don't.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Tim. Any other book reports you'd like to do while you're calling in to ask the people who know more about it than you do?
Well, I just like to kind of maybe bridge this into the misinformation or the censorship thing, because the Biden administration compelled Facebook and the social media to shut down what they were calling misinformation.
Yeah.
When you say calling things misinformation, was it actually false information?
I don't know every piece of it that was put out there. However,
do you know any piece of it, Tim? Tim, do you know any piece of it that was actually false that the government shut down?
Well, it was a directive.
Or anything that was true that the government forced to shut down.
Facebook and the social media.
Either way,
it was a directive to social media companies to generally.
Tim, what's wrong with the directive to social media companies to cut down on misinformation, if in fact it's misinformation?
Not to mention misinformation that gets people killed.
Yeah.
Some could say that that's against the First Amendment. It's compelled speech.
No. It's not compelled speech.
We do actually have limitations on these sorts of things. For example, if I am selling you a product and I tell you this will cure your cancer, I can rightly have the pants sued off me and many more articles of clothing because of false advertisement. If I said, well, it's just free speech, they would slap me across the face and sue me again for being that stupid. We actually do not allow speech that does that kind of harm to person or pocketbook.
Well, I mean,
so that's why I said if they were shutting down true information because they didn't want it out there for some reason, if they were shutting down true information, I can see that being an issue. But if they are going out and saying, hey, this is false information, it is getting people hurt, it should not get promoted on your platform, that seems like a reasonable thing for the government to send over to Facebook and say, hey, this is a problem. And Facebook has an interest because, hey, dead people aren't very good users of social media. So they also have a financial incentive to prevent that stuff being there. So again, Tim, if we want to talk about censorship, we care about opinions and we care about things that are factually true. Being censored because you have a opinion about ice cream, that's terrible. If you get censored because you say things that are factual, that is terrible. Saying things that are false that hurt people and having that not be promoted, that doesn't seem like a problem in the same kind of way. So I'll ask again, Tim, was there anything that was true that was being censored or being suppressed by the Biden administration?
Well, there's questions about the efficacy of masks. I mean, or exactly like I'm saying. Like, does the mask actually block the particles? I believe that was
Well, I
put
can
out there.
ask you this, Tim. Have you ever gone in for surgery?
I have not. No.
I have.
Okay. Yeah. Matt's had a few experiences, so I'll ask Matt this question. Matt, next time you actually need to go to the doctor's office and have some sort of procedure, do you feel comfortable asking the doctor, "Hey, could you take that mask off? I'd rather you breathe directly into my wounds."
Not remotely.
Do you think doctors have been wearing masks just for shits and giggles for, again, I don't even know how many decades at this point, maybe even centuries, because we understand the absolute basics of the germ theory of disease? To say that, hey, masks don't work is to deny everything we know about the basics of modern medicine, let alone like molecular mechanisms for the mRNA vaccine. This is the most basic stuff. The only question ever has been ultimately is what quality of mask is required. To what extent does the person who is coughing masking versus a person who's not sick masking, how much does that affect? How much does distance come into a factor? How much does temperature come in as a factor? Those things that can complicate things, but the question, do masks actually have any value? That was never an actual plausible question, and it only ever became an issue when some people found it as a way of trying to attack lockdowns or anything else like that for other politically motivated reasons. It was never science-based. And it's so ducking obvious in the same way, Tim, if you do ever go in for surgery, I am betting dollars to donuts. As you are laying on the table about to be knocked out, you are not going to tell the doctor, hey, take that mask off before you cut over my chest to do open heart surgery. I'm betting you're not going to say that.
Don't answer, Tim, because I have stuff to add. First of all, masking is one of the default initial steps for any new disease or condition that we don't know enough about. Because even if it's not necessarily effective against that one specifically, the odds, the risk assessment are that it is likely to be, because we know how things are transmitted. And we can tell whether or not some things are airborne transmitted and some things are surface transmitted. This is how we do this in science. But in the early stages, this is what we do. It is the normal thing to do. The problem is that the public are too stupid about some things, and that's probably all of our fault, because people were given the impression that if you put a mask on, you're fucking immune to it, which is not the case. It's not the case for anything. The surgeons could have had masks on, and still a particle could have got into my chest and given me an infection while they were sitting there messing around with my heart. There's, as Aaron was saying earlier, there's no absolute certainty here in this. I want to ask you this. If any government administration seeks to shut down the broad spread of misinformation, by the way, everybody who posted on Facebook and had their post removed was still free to say it to their friends, post it wherever else. But in the broad treatment of this, where one person can speak to many and influence them, if a government took an action to shut down misinformation that saved lives, isn't the correct response, thank you?
I think that would violate the First Amendment, though. I mean,
you're wrong. No, Tim, you are wrong. You don't understand the First Amendment in the slightest, but that's not the fucking question I asked. The First Amendment says that the government can't pose penalties on you for your free speech. And I literally just explained, shut up, Tim. I'm sorry. I'm trying to stop saying that. Please stop interrupting me. I'm not done. I literally just explained to you that those people who had their posts removed from Facebook is a private organization. They could post that elsewhere. They could say what they wanted elsewhere. Nobody's free speech was violated at all. Now, answer my question. If a government takes action to successfully reduce misinformation that saves lives, isn't the correct response, thank you?
No, I think that would be the government restricting speech.
You are demonstrably wrong, and you are immoral.
So
Because the correct response is thank you. The correct response is thank you for stopping the broad spread of misinformation that could have killed people and probably did kill people. Nobody's free speech was violated. Here, let me prove it to you. Tim, do you have a First Amendment right to post on Facebook?
no, but it's different if it's
No,
compelling.
you don't. Don't you dare say but. Don't you dare say but. You have no First Amendment right to post anything on Facebook. Facebook can shut you down for whatever reason they want, whenever they want. And so if the government says to Facebook, we want you to throttle this particular misinformation, they have not violated anybody's free speech rights. So admit that you're wrong and we'll move on. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Well, isn't that what they're doing with Jimmy Kimmel?
No, admit that you're wrong and we'll move on, or we'll move on. Those are your only options, Tim. You already acknowledged, there's no point in you trying to fight this. You already acknowledged you don't have a First Amendment right to post on Facebook. And the extension is limiting what you post on Facebook is not a violation of your First Amendment rights, correct?
So if the government works through Facebook,
I asked you a question, Tim. I'm going to mute you because you're now in you're not even, I don't even think you're honest. Because it's one thing for you to come in here confused and spouting your conspiracy theories, but I have led you up to the drink. You have already acknowledged. So I'm going to ask you some yes or no questions. If you say anything other than yes or no, we're done. Are we clear?
What's the question?
Are we clear?
Question.
What are we clear?
Sure.
Anything? No. Yes or no, are we clear?
Got it.
Goodbye, Tim.
And I showered. And then me and mom had a little photo shoot. I took pictures of her birthday.
Ooh, where's that audio?
It's here. It's here.
All right. This is
I will
the
note
problem.
this kind of goes to my earlier hypothesis. Did you notice that when we challenged him on when it came to the science of did the COVID vaccine help save lives, he seemed to be okay with that once push came to shove. But ultimately, his reason for pushing against all of it and trying to deny the science there was he thought his rights were somehow being violated. It was an ideology pushing for making the science conform to what he wanted to be true so he could break off that cognitive dissonance because he knows, hey, this vaccine saved, honestly, millions of lives. And being told that you have to do something to save other people's lives somehow infringes on him, and now he's angry.
Yes. Aaron was completely right addressing this about the motivated reasoning. And Tim's motivated reasoning is, I don't trust the government, and I don't like it when the government impacts anything in my life or requires me to do something or expects me to do something. And I don't like it when the government takes actions that I'm dubious about. But Tim is evidently dubious about all sorts of things because he hasn't been taught how to think skeptically, to think critically. And so even when we grab you by the hand and help you cross the street and say, do you have a First Amendment right to post on Facebook? Tim correctly responds, no. Whew. I was like, oh my God, we're gonna get there. I was so excited. We're gonna get there. Cool. If you don't have a First Amendment right to post on Facebook, then you cannot say that the government is violating your First Amendment rights by limiting your post on Facebook. They're not even saying you can't post on Facebook. They're not saying you can't post this on Facebook. They're saying nothing to you. They're saying, Facebook, you're a forum, and there's a bunch of people spreading misinformation. We want you to throttle back that misinformation because that's going to save lives. That's not a violation of anybody's First Amendment rights because by your own admission, Tim, you don't have a First Amendment right to post on Facebook. You are simply wrong. You do not understand free speech. And yet you are trying to use that as an excuse to that is your motivated reasoning. It's like, why not just say, Tim, you don't like it? Why can't you be honest? Is it because you think, like, I kid you not, Tim, everybody who sees this, and I'm engaging in hyperbole. There are some people who are going to see it. You'll see it, so you won't agree. But by and large, the overwhelming majority of people who see this clip are going to look at this and go, God, Tim's an idiot. Why wouldn't he just admit that it's not a free speech thing? Because Tim's motivated reasoning isn't about free speech. Free speech is the excuse Tim's going to use because there's some other underlying reason that he doesn't want to get to. And as Aaron and I go through the weeds here to try to find out what that secret kernel of fear is in Tim, he's just running around putting up, oh, it's First Amendment. Oh, it's this. What if the government makes a vaccine that sterilizes me? Well, in your case, it might be for the public good. But I would be opposed to it because that would actually be a violation of your rights. You see? That even though I think it's probably better if you don't procreate, and this is half joke. I don't know you. Whatever. Even if I thought you shouldn't procreate, I would be opposed to the government doing it without your consent.
Two quick things before we go to the next call, though. One, I think I should have also highlighted when it came to testing the vaccine, we're still not done testing the vaccine. We're constantly monitoring these for any adverse effects. So if something does come up and we find out 5 years after, oh, it has a 1% chance of increasing asthma, for example, I don't believe that's going to be the case, but suppose it is. Guess what? We are actually looking for these things. We have never stopped monitoring. We did not just do a couple months of testing, dusted off our hands, and this kept running. All vaccines are extremely documented, and any sorts of effects due to the vaccines or not are tracked to see if there is any increase of adverse effects, short and long term. So back to the matter is there's that. And secondly, I should also mention when it comes to free speech, misinformation, and things like that, I would like to get a touch personal. I've lost a few family members due to COVID on 2 continents. I lost my eldest aunt on my father's side in 2020 when she was living in a nursing home, and the virus rushed through there before vaccines could even exist. And my wife's grandmother, who lives in China, was also undone by the virus ultimately, and in part because China did something a bit interesting. We know that they had extremely severe draconian levels of lockdowns. Literally, you were locked in your room and have food delivered to your door, and that's the only time your door even gets to open. Like all of Shanghai, in that kind of condition. But China was also happy to let people think that the Western vaccines out there weren't all that great. They were allowing that kind of misinformation to go around. And also they were hearing from Western outlets, hey, the Chinese vaccine isn't all that good. Testing suggested it was only like 50% effective. So a lot of people in China decided to not get the vaccine. And then when basically China went from hard lockdown to, fuck it, because that was basically what they did after there were some outrages because there was a fire in a building. I think it was in Shanghai. And because of all the lockdown restriction stuff, the fire department couldn't get in there for a long time. And a lot of people were hurt. That caused like massive protests, which is extremely rare in China, as you can imagine. And so the order comes down. It's like, okay, we're ending all the lockdown stuff. It's a free-for-all now. And now you have a free-for-all with a large chunk of the population not vaccinated, no herd immunity. And so this allowed the virus to spread and ultimately come to where my wife's grandmother was, and unfortunately she got infected and suffered from that. So misinformation kills everyone on both sides of the world. No one is actually safe from it, even if you are trying to restrict speech or anything else. What's really going to get you is the communal aspect. We need to be working together as humans to solve these problems, because if we think individually and are happy to lie to each other, we will end up hurting ourselves and the ones we love.
We have a couple callers left, and of course we'll be getting to super chats. As always, I want to remind people that all your super chats over $10 we'll sit here and read and stay, as long as we can. I don't know if Aaron has a hard stop or not tonight. I forgot to ask. My apologies on that, but we will we'll do all that. So yeah, if you didn't get through on the phones, but we have a couple more callers to get to, and one of them's been on hold for 2 hours, amazingly. Let's not leave them on hold any longer. Jess from California, pronouns are he, him. Jess, what's going on? Thank you so much for your patience.
Hey, I think I've been listening this whole time. I guess I need to rephrase that question to, isn't it easier to respect somebody, at least if you're being honest? And I think that last call kind of broke it down. You know, I have my opinions on things, but I can admit when I'm wrong. I think that's the big difference. Is that you get these people that they'll twist themselves into pretzels, trying to prove their point, which makes no sense. Nope.
Hi. I don't know what to say.
I'm at a loss of words here as well.
What do you mean?
I hate to just drop you, Jess, because you were on hold for like over 2 hours, and I tend to respect people who are capable of being honest more. But the thing is, I don't tend to have a lot of conversations with those people because those conversations are quick and easy. I don't think the people who are calling in or the people who agree with them are necessarily intentionally dishonest, although some of them are, or particularly stupid or beyond learning, which is why I do this. If I thought there was no hope of reaching people, I would not show up here every week to argue with people. And I think this is, there's a guy that calls in frequently that called into Shoot Gum last night. I think is it Andrew, I think? Who I have a very short fuse with Andrew, and other people don't. And there are people who have made better progress with Andrew than I have. And so sometimes it's, there's a personality conflict. Sometimes it's, I don't like your mustache or your beard or your hair or whatever it is that rubs somebody the wrong way. So you can literally be saying the same thing and get different responses. It sounds different coming from different people. And so I try not to, like, there's somebody who just sent me a message saying, I shut your shit down. Good luck finding your Zen now. And I'm like, I'm pretty Zen right now. I don't know who this person was amongst the calls or the chat or whatever else, but it's like, if you're the type of person who's trying to, can we mute Aaron? Okay. If you're the kind of person who is, there are people who seem to only be calling in to taunt. So somebody who called in or was in chat or whatever has messaged me on Facebook on what seems to be, I'm assuming their real page, to be like, I shut your shit down. Good luck finding your Zen now. And it seems we're friends. So I'm going to fix that. And when they tell me who they are and why they shut shit down and what they're talking about, I'll fix that. But I don't know.
Okay. No, I think you actually covered most of what I wanted to go over in the process of the last 2 hours. So I don't think there's anything I'd love to touch on. I think you got to hit most of the points where, people they'll be dishonest to try and make their point when they know they're being dishonest. And there's no other explanation for it.
Yep.
But thanks for taking the call. I just, I've almost made the rounds now. I've talked to Chewed Gum, I've talked to Transatlantic, and now your show. So got 2 more to go.
Sweet.
But
don't forget about all those other shows. And by the way, thanks, Jess. Don't forget about all those other shows. I'll run through them. I don't know if I have a schedule right in front of me or not in the Hang Up window, but yeah, this is the Hang Up. It's Wednesday nights. It's my show. I have no idea who's on with me next week. We're working on some stuff. But Transatlantic Call-In Show is Thursdays at 2:00. It's a show focused on trans rights, trans issues. It's especially important now. Trans folks are under attack like never before. And I think if you called in and talked about it, one of the first things you'd find out is that they'd primarily just prefer to be left alone and stop being used as the boogeyman and MacGuffin for every political tragedy or policy initiative or whatever else that they're being used for. But if you have concerns about being transphobic or trans rights or anything related to that, you can call in and interact with actual trans people who give you their views on it and help you out. In addition, there's the Sunday show at 2:00 on Sundays. I believe I'm hosting this weekend. And then Sunday evenings is the Sunday Show After Dark. Mondays is Skeptalk, where you will frequently find my co-host tonight, Dr. Aaron Adair. And then Tuesday nights, Chewed Gum. I don't know who's on next week, but it's specifically, Chewed Gum is often about women's issues, and especially as they relate to religion and woo and purity culture and things like that. But there's also, I know there were some interesting discussions about dating advice and other stuff. You never know. I just, I'll be honest, if Forrest and Erica do a show, it's hard for me to not watch, but I probably won't watch for the entire 9 hours that those two will frequently go. I love them both to death, but I got other stuff on my plate, and I don't. I'll have TACIS streaming sometimes because it's on during the day while I'm doing other stuff, but I've had to miss it because of therapy and everything. I found myself watching Chewed Gum more and more. And it's just, there are better conversations on different topics. Right now, the world's kind of a mess. And I got one more caller here we're going to take before Super Chats. But Aaron and I we talked about this last week and when we had to postpone the show, because I genuinely am concerned about what he's described as motivated reasoning and how and why people put up roadblocks and how to fix it. My method, as you saw with Tim, is basically let me do this from a logical standpoint. Let me ask narrow questions that lead us to something. And then you have to explain how yours isn't covered in that. Do you have a First Amendment right to do this? No. That's the end of it. See, if there's a logical argument where one of the premises is it's a violation of my First Amendment rights to limit what I post on Facebook, then it doesn't matter what the rest of the argument is. If that is not true, and also that can't be the conclusion of your other argument if there's premises that are false, which is you don't have a First Amendment right to post on Facebook. You can have other objections. And Tim probably did. And it might be valuable at some point to get to what Tim's other objections are. But I've got a limit for how long I will sit here and keep doing a tap dance with someone who may not be honest, who may just be trolling. And at a minimum, I think probably the better thing to do is to say, let's stick a pin in this now, because I've clearly stumped you. And it's not fair for me to keep pushing you to come up with something on the fly, because you have this model in your head coming in and it's been dismantled and now you're just flailing. You're just, I don't know, maybe it's this. Well, what about this? What about that? It's flailing. Take a breath, hang up, go back and listen to the call again, take notes. And when you come up with a better reason or a better answer and you've had time to kind of coalesce those thoughts, call back then. It won't be nearly as entertaining. It probably won't get as many views. But as people will tell you, I'm not the guy who gives a fuck about views or clickbait. I didn't even monetize my YouTube channel until last December. I want to change things either in someone else's mind or in my mind so that the world leans more towards truth, or the closest approximation of truth we can get to for the philosophically minded. Are you ready for this final call?
Good to go.
All right. Natty is calling from Brazil. Pronouns they, them. They've been on hold for 2 hours, and they want to talk about how much influence does Trump have outside of the U.S. Natty, you are on with myself and Dr. Aaron Adair. How are you?
Hey, Aaron. Just before I get to my point, I would like to say there's a case study for Aaron's theory that here in Brazil, we also had our government basically fine Facebook and Twitter for allowing misinformation. And the only people that complained to talk about free speech were right-wing, because our government also investigated, and I would dare say a vast majority, I guess 90% of it, came from right-wing sources. So it is very much just a free speech for being up for the kind of deal.
Yes, and of course, one of those right-wingers is now, I think, currently in jail for different reasons, because my understanding is your former president is at least being told he's going to be behind bars for 27 years.
Yeah, that is exactly why I called, because, as you said, Bolsonaro, our ex-president, he tried to do a coup a la Trump and failed because he's somehow dumber than Trump. And a lot of the tariffs that Trump is imposing on Brazil is because of that, including what news outlets here said that next week there'll be even more because Bolsonaro was convicted and is going to jail. And it's like, what's in my head is, I say Trump, but it's like the administration in general. Like Marco Rubio was the one that talked about imposing even more tariffs and sanctions here in Brazil, against Brazil, sorry. How much power do they have? Because I've heard that the courts over there also said that it was unconstitutional, but they're still going. It's confusing.
I think it's confusing because we're all confused here over in the States. It would seem like, hey, the president can't unilaterally turn tariffs on and off. This should be under the rules of taxation, and our Constitution makes that clear that that is under the Congress, the legislature, not the president. So one would think, well, hey, this is clear. How come this wasn't swatted down within 30 seconds? And it's still going through the court. So I think the reason you're confused, Natty, is everyone else here in the country doesn't know what the halibut is going on. And also, frankly, will the president ultimately care if the courts go against him? Because that's always the biggest question is if the Supreme Court or whatever court says no, will the president just say, I'm the one with the troops? That's the thing that really scares me and would really, truly put us over the edge in a constitutional crisis we have not had since, in many ways, the Civil War.
I think there's a light example that happened just the other day that is relevant to this, or maybe yesterday or today. He was being asked a question by an Australian reporter who basically asked, is there a problem with a sitting president making so much money in the private sector type of thing? And after he, tried to shrug it off as it's his kids making money, he basically said, who are you with? And they're like, I'm with the Australian Broadcast Company. And Trump basically said, well, I think you're really poorly representing Australia. And, the leader of Australia is going to be meeting with me soon. And you guys really want to be on my nice side. I'm going to talk to him about you. And I'm like, I mean, I understand like how Tim might have some motivated thinking that I'm not aware of, but I really have a hard time finding motivated thinking that allows people to just ignore what seems blatantly obvious. Our rights are being thrown in the trash, and threats are being levied at almost anyone and everyone. And I don't know. It's weird. I wish it was a case study, like you're saying, but I'm not completely pessimistic, but my optimism is virtually gone about a better world in many regards. I'm not giving up. I won't give up till I'm dead. But whereas I was cautiously optimistic and mildly optimistic, I'm now kind of flatline on. I mean, it's like everything's teetering in the balance right now, and I don't understand how people can't see what's actually happening. And maybe they do see, and this is what they want. I don't know.
Yeah, I see the same thing here because our Supreme Court, the whole thing in Bolsonaro, they convicted him, and yet it's such an overwhelming amount of people from the right and center that calls them unconstitutional for convicting someone that tried to pull a coup. It's insanity. It's difficult to imagine that people can be in that state of mind.
I think we mentioned the phrase earlier, motivated reasoning. When your side is the one being attacked or you feel it's being attacked, any justification you can think of, you will use in the arsenal to try to win the battle, rhetorically, or if things get worse, physically. And yeah, I remember seeing the stuff about the attempted coup in Brazil and the actual response to hold account Bolsonaro and now actually having him convicted makes me think, okay, I'm not going to say everything is sunshine and roses in Brazil, but it seems like, hey, that's a system that's actually holding an executive to account, which I don't think has ever happened in U.S. history.
Yeah, yeah. I have to say that I have quite a few problems with Brazil, but the Supreme Court is surprisingly effective at holding elected officials accountable.
Right. Also, one other thing, I thought you said earlier, Natty, that you thought Bolsonaro was dumber than Trump. Am I correct when you said that?
Yeah.
I would have to disagree because Bolsonaro can speak Portuguese pretty well.
That's true. If it's okay to not end on a bit of a bummer, is it okay if I talk about something that Matt mentioned at the start of the show about
sure.
Yeah, about how to figure out reliable sources of information, because there are so many different ways that I can go online and search for information. That how do you go about finding reliable sources of information?
So I'm going to answer first because I think my answer is probably I don't know what Aaron's answer is going to be, so I can't judge it till afterwards. But here's what I do. When it comes to hard claims about science, I trust reputable journals that have a track record and reputable sources that have a track record of being correct and consistent. When there's 6 or 8 sources, this is probably true for news and everything else as well. Like, for example, I was live on the air when somebody in chat said Jimmy Kimmel got canceled. I went and Googled it, and what I found immediately were several sources saying not that he had been canceled, but that 40 minutes before I went searching, they had announced that they had suspended him indefinitely, which is a little different from being canceled, but it's still an indefinite suspension. And when I found that from a variety of different sources, I didn't stop there. I clicked into one of the sources and checked it out. And that's where I saw the note about the FCC thing. And then when I came on to talk about it, the way I talked about it is it's been reported that this is happening. And here's what I read. I'm saying I'm convinced this is likely correct. And I will adjust my position as soon as there's better information, including information that says this was all a hoax. This was Guillermo trying to publicize a new tequila brand called, Cancelilla. It doesn't matter. It is. I don't rely on single sources. I don't reach conclusions until I think I have justification. And I know what you're saying. I know you're saying, yes, I know you, Matt, but what is the justification? And that's what I'm talking about. Consistency with a variety of reports. It's similar to the scientific method where we're trying to replicate results. And if only one person is able to produce something, and everybody who attempts to replicate it fails, the initial report is essentially maybe not permanently discarded, but discarded as we can't reach a conclusion off of that yet. And what a lot of people doing is not only are they not going to multiple sources, they're barely reading the headline correctly and then reaching a conclusion. The same thing happened when I posted Zero Sympathy. Watch them in chat. Oh, you're saying nobody should have sympathy. That's not at all what I said. You read the headline and didn't read into anything else. And so I want to use multiple sources. I keep advertising them even though they're not promoting me, so I should probably stop doing it. But there's a site called Ground News that I make use of to try to make sure that I'm not only getting information from one source. It's hilarious to me when people call in and say, well, you're just watching MSNBC. No, actually, I almost never watch MSNBC. I will watch clips a little bit from MSNBC and CNN and Fox News. And let's see, there's a ton of independent reporters that I will watch. I like Majority Report with Sam Cedar and Emma Vigeland. I apologize if I mispronounced her name. I never remember if it's Vigeland or Vigilant, but she's phenomenal. And but I don't take anything that they say as gospel either. When people send something to me, I try and go look it up. And if I don't have the time or the ability to investigate it, I don't believe it. And if I start advocating for something without good justification, as I did for the Groyper thing, then I take it down and I correct it as best I can. I don't know that I don't know that you can really do much more. That's the Hume axiom to the wise man proportions his confidence to the evidence. And so you should not be more confident in something than the evidence allows, which I know also doesn't tell you how to determine how much evidence is enough evidence. I don't even know how to, there's not a way to assess it other than what I'm talking about. But Aaron may have a much better answer.
I probably won't have too much more in terms of answers, but I can at least make recommendations of things to use in your own investigations. So, I recently read the book Why Trust Science by Naomi Oreskes. Oreskes is actually well known as a historian of science. She wrote this blockbuster book called Merchants of Doubt, where she basically did a bunch of archival research and found out, hey, the fossil fuel companies knew about global climate change, knew what was going to happen, and paid a bunch of lobbyists groups to go around and lie about it so that way they could keep the profits coming. She then wrote this later book on the historical and philosophical issues for when is science reliable, when it fails to get to the truth, why is that, and what sorts of things make it so science and scientists as a community are more trustworthy than individual scientists or lobby groups or things like that. So I do recommend that book, but just the cliff notes for it is this. The main reason that science tends to get to the right answers is it's a community of people who have a bunch of different backgrounds and arguing about what the truth is and being critical of each other, so that way what becomes a consensus of that group is much more likely to be true because it is not caused by any one person's preferred beliefs or certain groups' ideas are being suppressed and kept out of that. Everyone has to basically, as the old saying goes, put up or shut up when it comes to the evidence. That's different, obviously, than lobbying groups that are basically paid to make the announcements they are paid to make. Things like that. Ultimately, though, unless you want to really learn the science yourself, the best you can probably do is find out what is the consensus of scientists for a position, and far more often than not, that's going to put you in the right path to make smart decisions than to ignore it or to go with the opposite of that. If you want to prove science wrong or scientists wrong, the only way you can usually do that is more and better science, which means a lot of homework for you if you want to do that. That's true, I think, for fields in general. If you want to say historians are wrong and the Roman Empire didn't exist, you got a lot of work ahead of you, to put it mildly. The same kind of thing. I don't know if that's ultimately helping you answer your question, Natty, but those are the most immediate things I can think of to say.
No, that is very helpful. Yeah.
Natty, I appreciate
I guess
I appreciate the
that's it.
call. Yeah, I need to wrap it up. But it sounded like you were getting ready to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say that I think it needs to be said now more than ever. Trans rights. Brazil has, as far as I know, the biggest pride parade in the world. So there's a lot of us that are in solidarity with especially trans people in the U.S. So yeah, absolutely trans rights.
I love Brazil. I wish I could go to Brazil. I've never been to Brazil. And one of my favorite snakes is actually native to southern Brazil as well. And it would be nice to maybe get to herp and see one in the wild. So who knows? Maybe someday I will get to come to Brazil. Who knows? Maybe someday I'll be forced to hide in Brazil. Thanks so much for the call, Natty. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you later. All right. I need to go full screen for a minute.
All right.
And that is because the President of the United States sent this out on Truth Social, the social media platform that he owns. And by the way, as business is being done, more and more of the social media platforms are being owned by, transferred by, including potentially TikTok, all of the billionaire friends of the current administration. And they're shutting down free speech left and right. Great news for America. The ratings challenge Jimmy Kimmel show is canceled, which actually isn't accurate based on the reports I read. But okay, I'll give him the colloquialism. It's the least dishonest thing I think he's probably done this week. Congratulations to ABC for finally having the courage to do what had to be done. Jimmy Kimmel, Kimmel, has zero talent and worse ratings than even Colbert, if that's possible. That leaves Jimmy and Seth, two total losers on fake news NBC. Their ratings are also horrible. Do it, NBC, President DJT. Not just the FCC. This is the President of the United States acknowledging that he's already got Colbert, and tonight he got Kimmel, and now he's going after the other. Ask yourself this. I thought comedy was legal again. I thought free speech was the important thing. I thought cancel culture was the problem of the left. Every claim they make is an admission to their own views. They are the violence problem. They are the lying problem. They are the no talent problem. They have the least qualified, least intelligent, least honest, least productive individuals in virtually every position of government that they have stuck somebody into. This is absolutely petty and obviously so. This is a coward. Kankle's McCowardly Tits is now trying to take out everybody that he doesn't think is funny. And yet, curiously, ratings aside, the fact of the matter is these people clearly have talent. You know who else has talent? A bunch of comedians that I couldn't fucking stand. They still have talent. It's a lie. It's a sham. This is an autocracy. You're watching it happen. We're going to read the super chats. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep trying to do stuff. But if you don't see that life in the United States as you knew it is already over and potentially getting worse, I don't know what else to say. Like, I genuinely don't know what else to say. They're doing it right in front of your face. As I said in my live stream yesterday at the end, when Trump said he could grab him by the pussy, he's talking about you. Every one of you. All of you MAGA supporters, he's grabbed you, you pussies. He's lying to your face, and he's taken away your rights. And when he's done with the trans folks and the queer folks and the lefties, you're next in line. Because when the elite 1% takes out the 1% that's trans, then they'll take out the next bottom 1% and the next bottom 1% until all that's left is control over the percentage that they need to keep them building ballrooms and playing golf and pretending that they have some talent. If you don't see it, I don't know how else to say it. If you are still a MAGA, if you're still a MAGA supporter, it's already long gone. You're not tuned in. I don't give a shit about you. But the weird thing is, I do. When I said I couldn't muster sympathy for Charlie Kirk, and it bugged me, it's because as a humanist, I do value human life, even the lives that I hate, even the ideas that I hate. And yet this world is driving me to the point where I'm having a difficult time seeing hope. I'm having a difficult time understanding how people can sit idly by or cheering at the destruction of the rule of law, the Constitution, free speech. This isn't a bird with two fucking wings. There's a giant eagle, and they're trying to shoot it down, and I'm trying to stop them from shooting it down, and so are some other people. Not advocating for violence. Don't know when that line could or should be crossed. Well, don't you dare fucking tell me that I need to play nice and be respectful. Don't you dare tell me that, oh, we all want the best things, and if we just work together, take your hippy dippy shit and go away. You're part of the problem now. You're not the worst ever. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. But you are aiding and abetting traitors to the Constitution and the very foundation of what the United States is supposed to be about. And as the United States goes, the rest will crumble as well. You world leaders, what are you going to do when fascists control everything except for your country? There's no place safe to go. I'm not hopeless. And yet I'm without hope. Stew on that.
Oh,
$10
we didn't read the previous chat.
It's not the one in order. That one shouldn't have been up there.
Oh, I was able to read it, though.
Okay, go for it.
Well, it said it was $5 from Jack, and then I realized, oh, the message, it seems to be blank, but what he's really saying is Jack Squat.
Ha! Oh, see, I really like that. But $10 from Greg Borkowski. Thanks for the show, guys. Thank you, Greg. Good to see you again. Are we doing this one?
Oh, sorry. $10 from Anti-Meridian. Got a letter from the Census Bureau doing a survey of college graduate jobs. Now, I don't feel safe replying with the current administration. It feels like a way to identify and trap people.
That's wild.
I don't know what to say, and I don't want to say anything either way.
Yeah. I'm not going to give any advice.
Technical issues. I'm going to refresh my window.
Sure. I don't know what to say on something like this, except that I understand the trepidation, and it's wild. Isn't it wild that we have reasonable concerns over something as seemingly mundane as answering census questions, things that are important, things that are going to allow us to figure out how to draw districts, how many people are in an area, how many representatives they have. There's incredible value to something like a census. And yet, if you don't trust the census takers, I guess you could eat them with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Okay. All my references are too old. $10 from the atheist mechanic. Hey, man. Matt is spitting straight facts tonight. Glad you're doing better. Yeah, I'm doing really good. I made the monad be with us all, especially the potential calls coming up. Yeah. I'll do the quick summary here, by the way, because there's more super chats climbing up, and I appreciate that. We're going to read all the super chats over $10. By the way, if you think the current government's fascist, you should pop up $10 just to say so, just so we can show them, hey, if you try and shut down this show on free speech grounds and whatever else, we're still going to support the show. We're still going to be supporting on patreon.com/calltheline. We're still going to be going to linemerch.com. We're still, wherever this show and other shows on this network air, wherever the people are willing to actually tell me what's going on, to be honest about it, that's what we're going to support. So enjoy your ballroom. I hope you have plenty of room for your balls. On Sunday, if anybody watched the Sunday show, before the show went live, I was feeling really weird. And it felt like I was high. And full disclosure, I have a number of health issues. I've had a triple bypass, but all of my doctors have said that I am in the best health that I've been in 30 years. All of my numbers are on the right track. My weight is down, my sugar is down, my A1C is down. Just doing really good. And the neuropathy seems to have stalled. I have numbness, but it's not getting any worse. And some things are actually improving. But because of the neuropathy, I would get the legal weed vapes, the THC 0 Delta 8, because that's all that's available in Texas, although they're trying to take it away, and they have taken it away. And I don't like to be high in front of people, which is why you've only seen me high on the show 2 times, I think, and they were both kind of fun shows. I don't like to be drunk, none of that. I like my brain when it's working. But at the end of the night, after everything else, I'll hit the vape. It makes me tired. I go in and I get good sleep, because prior to that, between the neuropathy and other things, I was getting about an hour and a half to 3 hours sleep a night if I was lucky. After I started vaping, boom, 5, 6, 7 hours of sleep, easy. And there's a lot going on. And there's a lot of stress. And there's stress that has nothing to do with the country or this or anything. There are other things, believe it or not, there are other things in my life right now that can be stressful. But just the day-to-day, hey, what are we going to do about X? Not the platform. I'm using that as the unknown. It's a big deal. So Saturday night, I didn't sleep particularly well. Because I couldn't get a vape, I'd ordered new gummies, and they were new to us. And so I took a half a gummy Saturday night, had a normal high, went to sleep, didn't sleep particularly well. Woke up, felt fine, then started feeling high. And as we got closer to the show, I was like, wow, I can't wake up. I feel so sluggish. And I did something that was probably very, very stupid, which I'll tell you in a minute so you can laugh. Got to build up to the punchline. And I thought, maybe that gummy, maybe there's pieces of that gummy that was left over, and now I'm high again. And I went to Arden and I was like, I'm kind of fucked up. Maybe we should look for a substitute. And we did, but we couldn't find one. And finally, even after talking to Seth and Seth saying, he could do it by himself, I was like, let me give it a shot. You do most of it. I'll just sit here and chime in on occasion. In the first 7 minutes of that show, it felt like 45 minutes to me. And by the time we got around to about the hour point, I very clearly had about 20 seconds of active memory. So I would start giving a response and then forget where I was going. Now, don't get me wrong. I do this when I'm not high or ill as well, because that's just the way my brain works, ADHD, whatever. I left the show. I went and laid down on the floor in Arden's office, and she took me to the emergency room. They did a CAT scan that came up with an absolutely terrifying picture, which was just an error, but it looked like a good chunk of my brain was just missing. And so they put me in an ambulance and shipped me to a hospital for an MRI. The good news is the MRI came back completely clear. No problem. I did not have a stroke. They kept me overnight to clear out the stroke. By morning, I was fine. They released me. I was in the hospital less than 20 hours. And while I'm tired and sluggish since then, I'm definitely, we're going to look into it. I'm seeing a neurologist, everything else. The thing that I did wrong is I drank 3 of these full throttle energy drinks on Sunday morning. Those are really big, and it's a lot of caffeine. It is, in fact, where is it? Oh, I'm not finding it on there. Maybe it's not a lot of caffeine. Anyway, whatever it was, we suspect that me having 3 of those energy drinks, which might have been sugar, although it didn't spike my sugar because my sugar is under control, may have contributed to some problems with high blood pressure and stress and all of it put together. I may have done this to myself. So since getting out of the hospital, I have avoided, for the most part, the energy drinks, and avoided the gummies or any weed-based stuff at all. And I'm going to keep doing that while I try to get regular sleep until I go see my doctor and go see the neurologist. But generally speaking, I was cleared. It was an anomaly. And tonight I felt pretty good. Definitely lucid. Any confusion coming out of my mouth is just the normal bit because I'm pretty okay. And so that's the full update. Here we go. You want to do this one?
All right. Yes. We got $10 from Space Barbarian. I think innumeracy has gotten so bad that people can't tell the difference between things that are bigger or smaller, let alone any statistics.
To be fair, the problem of innumeracy has gotten worse. The book is still really good.
I think I have a copy of it somewhere behind me.
I would imagine. I have 2 copies. I gave one to somebody else. I don't know if it got returned, and then I gave one to Arden. And she loves me so much that she still hasn't read it. Oh yeah, I'm loading up the next one. Hey, here we go.
I already did this joke.
There you go. It's Jack Squat, and that puppy is squatting. Kind of. $10 from the atheist mechanic. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Yes, and super chats that don't come with money can be dismissed without reading them.
$20 from Green Man Dave. I don't always send unsolicited pics, but when I do, I send the fictional Grayson Tracy Jones, RoboCop.
Nice. Yeah. Don't be a Richard. Thank you so much. $10 from Zombo73. Thank you. The road to fascism is lined with people telling you that you're overreacting. Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating. I mean, there are people I genuinely like, and I noted. I'm not outing anybody. This is a public conversation, but it's nobody's business. This is one of the people that I have the most problem with is someone who's wonderful, like genuinely a nice. And this is true across the board. These people they're nice. They're probably nicer than I've ever been. They genuinely want peace. They want an end to conflict. And so they're willing to tolerate more and go along to get along. And the only problem with that particular tolerance is that it is rife and ready for abuse. If somebody knows that you're going to forgive them and willing to work with them, no matter how bad they are, they're going to push the limits of that. And everybody's got their limits in a different place. And if your limits aren't where mine are, that's fine. Just don't be trying to tell the rest of us what our limits should be unless you can actually justify them. If you have good reason for limits, I'm open to it. If you want to be like, there should never be violence, cool. If you want to say, it's time for it now, make your case. But the kumbaya, let's all play nice, that ship has fucking sailed. For me, at least.
I think I read this one.
Go for it.
All right.
$10 in the atheist mechanic.
This delay.
This is the problem with the delay. People want to see the problem with the delay. This is the delay between me and Aaron. So when you see the frustration, please, like if we were all sitting in the same room, there'd be no issue. There's a delay between me and the production staff, and the production staff and Aaron, and between us and the callers. We don't all hear things at the same time. Yes, we are looking for solutions. We're just trying to do our best. Aaron, please read this one.
Very well. $10 from the atheist mechanic. Seems as of now, it's free speech for me and not for thee. Hypocritical and scary times ahead. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. And of course, we will be gaslit that it was the left that was being the cancelers the whole time. And how dare you ever say anything otherwise? And if you say anything bad against the current president, you must be suppressed. It's cancel culture, not to make you shut up. That's it. That's the ticket.
Yeah. I think my favorite meme from the last 24 hours or so is that they were going after people who they thought weren't significantly or sufficiently or appropriately mourning Charlie Kirk and trying to get them canceled or fired or whatever else. And Robert Redford died in the midst of all this. And by the way, Robert Redford, to my knowledge, genuinely a good person. An activist for animal rights, human rights, climate change. He's the reason there's a Sundance Film Festival. He's an actor, a director, probably writer, producer. I don't know all of his credits. He did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid the year I was born, and then went on to do a ton of other great things. And I am sad that his recognition and legacy has been overshadowed by all of this crap about a blogger who was play acting at debating most of the time. But my favorite meme about it was a fake news announcement from the government that anybody found insufficiently mourning Robert Redford shall be fired.
I will also note, there is, of course, the alternate universe where he also was a very good U.S. president.
Yeah, although he was a bad guy in another film. But $10 from Regato. I said it Monday and I'll say it again. I am living in a dystopian society like the ones about which I used to read and watch in sci-fi books and shows long ago. Yeah. I don't get it.
Yeah, the Hunger Games was not supposed to be an instruction manual.
Yeah.
$10 from the Atheist Mechanic. I worked for an ambulance service while COVID was happening. To say it was scary was an understatement. I'm thankful for the vaccine. My mom didn't get it and is only now getting her sense of taste back. Oh, I see that.
I heard from people
I also
about
have to
that.
imagine a lot of ambulance riders or folks might have also been accosted along this. I remember a little bit of background. I used to have a girlfriend from Germany, and her sister was going through medical training. And so for like one summer, she was an ambulance driver. And in Germany, they have their own, political, social problems. And one of them is that, we have issues in this country when it comes to immigration. Germany has them too, where effectively Turkish people are in many ways become almost like second-class citizens. And she was the ambulance driver to this building that was mostly Turkish there. And that meant also most of them were not very fluent in German speaking. So these people come in and take this body away. And it seems like also potentially maybe against the wishes of the people there. And pretty much a crowd forms around this ambulance and even starts shaking that. It was like one of the scariest things in her life, this happening to her. And that's what happens when you have a society that has trust issues because of what the society has done to break that down. I fear that we are doing that to ourselves in this country, separating ourselves in such diversely angry tribes that we are only going to, well, when people come to help, we're going to see the worst in them. And I fear we're going to be doing that more and more. And we need to find ways to communicate and fix that problem. That's the only way we're going to make it as a country.
I just had a weird thought. In my feed lately, there have been a lot more of these shorts from, I guess, like First Amendment auditors and stuff, where somebody's just standing outside someplace filming and some Karen or whoever comes out to accost them. Why are you filming out here? This is illegal. What's your name? And they're just basically saying, no, I have the right to do this. I'm out in public. I get to film. And the people filming are right almost all the time. There's a couple of times where they violated some other things, but I'm not a lawyer. But it's like, how is it that these videos, which exist, should be good at teaching people the true limits of rights? And yet there doesn't seem to be any reduction in supply of outraged people pretending that you can't stand on a public sidewalk and film. And it kind of makes, there are things that are not aligning in my brain right now between, hey, we're exposing more dishonesty and confusion about First Amendment stuff, and yet it's getting worse. And every single day, I am less confident that those First Amendment rights are going to be protected for me. There was a time I had to call the police because during COVID, somebody threatened me, punched my car window, tried to chase me down, and the police came out, and this asshole cop, I've already talked about it before, basically said that, he wishes that we could get back to the old days where we just take somebody out back and beat the shit out of him. And in my head, what I said was, get the fuck off my property and don't come near me. Because I don't need police officers that are lamenting the reduction in violence. But instead, I just ended it and said, you guys can go, and I went back in. At what point am I going to stop calling the police when that happens? At what point am I going to stop submitting threats to the FBI? I mean, I don't think Kash Patel gives a fuck if somebody threatened me. At what point is it going to be the case that even if you have rights, you don't have rights? We've seen this before with trap laws, limiting access to things. Oh, we're not going to technically outlaw abortion, but we'll make it so that you can't get one essentially effectively. Or if you can, we'll just stand outside and harass you. I'm genuinely terrified a good chunk of the time. And what's funny is, not funny, haha, the 4chan basement dwelling, neck bearded, Pepe Le Frog, whatever, I'm going to troll. They seem unstoppable. And they seem completely unconcerned with either consequences or any reduction in their rights. The bot army has gotten huge. While I would have dismissed dead internet theory once upon a time, it is true in some regard. Over the last couple of weeks, I did some cataloging of who was objecting to what I say. And there were some genuine people who objected to what I said. And then there were a handful more that were using the same type of language. And when I went to their Facebook profile, they had no public posts for the last 2, 3, 4 years. And their other posts had nothing to do with this. And they didn't seem to even match up with the type of conversation. And so I'm pretty sure what's happening is as people are leaving or getting banned from or getting their accounts compromised, bot farms, and Arden told me yesterday, I have not looked up the information yet, so go look it up. And Arden, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a new study that came out specifically showing that essentially Russian bot farms have, over the past week or so, been intentionally spreading false information in both directions with regard to the Charlie Kirk shooting. Is that what you were telling me?
Yeah, I didn't see the exact numbers, but there were multiple organizations that were tracking these sorts of things that noticed an increase in what they deemed Russian sourced misinformation, coming both from like queer communities and from conservative communities. So like they were trying to inflame tensions in both of those domains. So
yeah, they're trying to stir up shit because chaos works to their benefit. So it's not just the calls coming from the inside of the house. It's not just that the current administration are, in my view, traitors to the Constitution and the rule of law. There are external forces as well that are intentionally stirring things up. I'm saying things right now, dead serious, that once upon a time, I would have been like, that's conspiracy theorist nonsense. Except that not only is there increasing evidence for it, it is consistent with the observed facts of reality. Right down to the president calling for MSNBC to fire the other two funny guys in late night. All because, I don't know, tiny hands, Epstein files. Hey, release the Epstein files. Release all of them. Let's not just grill Kash Patel in front of Congress so that he looks like a raving buffoon, which he does. Watch those things. I'm thinking about doing a video specifically taking portions of his interview and showing they asked this question, he refused to answer it. It's his tap dance around. These are yes or no obvious questions. Did you tell anyone at the FBI that people were going to be let go for working on these things? No one at the FBI has ever been fired for casework. I didn't ask you whether or not they've been fired. Did you tell? You can't get to the truth because all of these people have been instructed to obfuscate and to dance and just keep throwing out the same line because you can't give a soundbite to the enemy. You can't give a soundbite that might convict you. But also, it seems like they're less and less concerned that they're ever going to have to face consequences, that they're ever going to have to, that there will ever be anybody else in control of the Senate or the White House or the House. It seems that way. Is it that way? I don't know yet, but it's absolutely terrifying.
I'm not terrified by these $10 from Joshua Everett, though. What does he say?
You
My
shouldn't be.
support for the continued free speech and search for truth that The Line brings to so many. Even if the callers don't learn anything, the rest of us can be convincing to the people we care about. That's part of what this is. We are trying to, we obviously are in many ways talking to people that think like us, but also we need to be promoting talking. That's the only way we're going to really change minds, is talking to each other.
See, it sounds like you've been listening to is that from Division Bell or Pulse? I think it's from Division Bell. It's Pink Floyd. It's got Stephen Hawking saying, basically it's about the thing that makes us special is communication. And the thing that will fix this is we have to keep talking. And I'm in favor of talking. I'm not in favor of capitulating to fascists, racists, bigots, homophobes. My talking is going to be to challenge them. And, there's some things I'm happy to compromise on. The perfect is the enemy of the good. But you know what else is the enemy of the good? Evil.
Bad.
$10 from Space Barbarian. Regarding sources, I have a technical expertise and I know how much work it took to acquire it. I look for people who have put the work in to know their subject as well and honestly as I have. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's an ineffable thing that's difficult because you're saying it's like pornography, the Supreme Court's thing on pornography. We know it when we see it. I would definitely say the Statue of David isn't pornography, despite the fact that it's a naked male penis out. I don't think it's pornography. I think if you go on Pornhub, you will find pornography. Actually, am I even allowed to say that? Who knows? I don't know what I'm allowed to say anymore. But there's a wide range in between. And when I was a kid growing up, that was Cinemax. Cinemax would have the censored pornography, which for me as a teenager was just as good as porn. I mean, I didn't need to see anything over the top, just the whole, and I remember I had a friend whose dad had a satellite and he would turn the satellite in to get the unedited stuff and everything else. But because it wasn't a channel that they had subscribed to, it was all fuzzy and wobbly and and yet you kind of know it when you see it. There may be fine lines in how reliable something is, but I think we can agree that even if we find, let's say, the New York Times incredibly biased, the stuff in the New York Times is going to be generally more reliable, even if it's wrong and even if it's biased, than the Weekly World News. We can fiddle on stuff, and I don't put them at opposite ends of the spectrum because the truth is I don't know where the New York Times goes in relation to the Weekly World News. It may be not much above it. It may be way above it, but we can recognize a difference between it, and it's really hard to describe.
I have to say, though, I do like the editorials in the New York Times from Batboy. All right, we got $10 here from Infinite Saxon. Trump didn't just attack science, he strangled it. He made ignorance a policy and conspiracy a platform. That's destruction, not debate. I agree more than 100%.
That's not possible.
I would make
pedantic
it
boy. If they can say that Jimmy Kimmel has no talent, I think you can be more than 100% confident. Why not? $10 from the atheist mechanic. This government is a fastest hellhole. Yes. We're going to see a lot of these that we're probably going to do in rapid order. Thank you. Huge thank you to everybody who who fell into my support the network thing here.
And now we got $10 from Perfectly Flawed. The current government is definitely fascist. Yeah, that's how I
I'd
feel.
like to remind you. Yep. Nobody's nerfic, by the way. Thanks so much, Perfectly Flawed. $10 from Unstillborn. The U.S. government is fascist. Yep.
10 Canadian dollars from Ayla Ursus. Cute doggo, cute kitty.
That's Ayla Squat.
I'm drawing a blank on that.
I tried to do a callback to your joke in the absurdist sense, and man, somebody fucking laughed when I said that. I know they did. $20 from Nickum. I'm going to say that that's something in the neighborhood of love Donald Trump. This community and FFRF are more necessary than ever. Keep fighting with words. Yeah, because if we don't fight with words, the nature of the fight's going to change, and we're not going to have any say in that.
Mm-hmm. $10 from Misty Wolf Multi. I really appreciate it, guys. I'm a college student majoring in environmental science. I want to work in conservation. It's really discouraging having our national parks attacked, but I'm not giving up. I'm glad you're not giving up, because honestly, as time goes on, we're going to need even more people that know how to do this sort of conservation work. So I am glad you are gaining that skill set.
$10 from Kelly Sure. Thank you so much. I like this show, and I'm a theist. Appreciate seeking reason and logic through this platform. Glad things are better, Matt. If you like this show and you're a theist, thank you. And I'm confused, and yet I'm happy, because there are plenty of theists of different varieties that are not awful. In fact, almost all of them, the overwhelming majority of them. And it's nice when people see that what we're attacking are problematic ideas. And, you know, so for example, I was told today, damn, now I don't want to say it, but then that would be teasy. Somebody who despises me, who considers himself a rather fancy pants agnostic, is now full on MAGA, has it in his profile and everything. And it's like, man, when you find out that the people you had problems with were harboring secret fascist right-wing crap, even though it does not in any way impact the accuracy of their statements on other things, it's still kind of soothing to know that you don't have to pay attention to the other crap or spend much time debunking it. So, hi, Steve. Enjoy yourself. And thank you so much, Kelly.
$13.99 Canadian from Maureen O'Hara. Does MAGA know that authoritarians will eventually take their guns? I don't remember exactly what, I mean, I forget who said it, but he ended up in a concentration camp, and he's famous for the lines like, you know, at first they came for the communists and I said nothing, then they came for the socialists, etc., etc. Then they came for the Jews, then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Yeah, that's how the history of it goes. And some people think, well, I'm going to be the one wearing the boots, not having the boot on me. And that's the fantasy everyone has until, well, the worst happens.
Yeah, it's why people vote against their own best interest instead of caring about perhaps something akin to universal basic income, something akin to guaranteed right to healthcare, anything in the ballpark of that, something about, hey, let's not keep making billionaires more billions as people go broke, as farmers are seeking help. Okay, see, that's that 20-second window. So we're coming up on the end of it because I forgot where I was going. But yeah. $10 from Eliashana Silverbow. Having taken my dad in the emergency room several times, I know just how stressful and exhausting it can be. Much love to both Matt and Arden. Also, Aaron, you're all right too. I think so. I agree as well.
All right, that's a high bar for me to reach.
Aaron and I don't often get to do shows together. It was one of the reasons why I not only asked and was eager to get him on here. It's like, oh, you end up working Skeptalk, and I end up working this, and then our Sunday shows don't necessarily align, everything else. And I was like, I want to talk about some science stuff. And of course, then somebody went and killed Charlie Kirk and derailed stuff, even derailed parts of tonight. Hopefully, we gave some people some things to think about on verifying sources and motivated reasoning and humility in saying, this is what I've been told, this is what I accept, and my confidence level is properly proportioned to the available support for it. Measured responses.
9.99 from Outwitted by Fish. I prayed for a sign. The next day, every fence post I drove past had a raptor perched atop it, watching me. Is that an omen or just a post hoc rationalization?
Wow. That the links that some of you guys go to for puns. I mean, I'm sad that Aliashana didn't one up you on that already. $10 from Jamnik06. Hey man, I rewatched Idiocracy and noticed two things. I won't rewatch it. I'm terrified to rewatch it to find out the thing I thought was ridiculous is actually where we've moved beyond it. Notice two things Trump has prevented from coming true. There was still a Department of Education, and when they used water on crops instead of sports drinks, a rose grew by the White House. Nice.
$10 from Legally Maud. For 3 or 4 generations, American school kids have been told that you don't have to be smart for your opinion to matter. I think that message is partly responsible for the mess we're in. I'm careful about that because I do think people's opinions matter, whether or not they're quote unquote smart. We should be listening to people's opinions, and if we think they're wrong, changing it through dialogue, discussion, evidence. Saying you're too stupid and we shouldn't be listening to you, I think is the way that we further divide ourselves.
Yes, which I have gotten increasingly guilty of. Wouldn't have been, but it's very frustrating because a lot of the people that call the show, the conversations go in such a way where I have a hard time figuring out who's for real and who's putting on a show. And the weird thing is that the people who know me, like in person, I could be wrong. I might be deceiving myself, but I think all of them would probably agree that for the most part, what you see is what you get. That it's like the people that were like, you wouldn't say it to my face. And I'm like, what makes you think that? Oh, because you'd hit me? Cool. I mean, I've had, in the last couple of weeks, I've had 3 different people threaten to punch me because I have anger issues. What is that? What is that? I wouldn't punch you. I've never punched anyone in my entire life. I have no interest in punching anybody. And if you showed up to punch me, I'm pretty sure, even if you didn't knock me out, I probably wouldn't punch you back. Oh, yeah, I knew Matt was the sissy. See, that's what it's the same thing every time.
I have to say, when you said they were going to punch you because you get too angry, the first thought that went through my head, is that like saying the beatings will continue until morale improves?
Exactly. He beats me because he loves me. 22 euros from Sacham FIFA? Oh, probably FIFA. Okay. From 1932 to 2024, voting behavior didn't improve, but arguably got worse with all the access to knowledge and much better economic conditions. Plato must be laughing at us from his grave. I go back and forth. I think Jimmy and I were having a discussion once. Oh, crap. I just unplugged my headphones, but it doesn't matter. I'm pretty sure you guys can still hear me. Jimmy and I were having a discussion once about whether or not it would even be constitutionally possible to have mandated voting. I'm pretty sure that, if I remember right, my objection to what it violated in the Constitution doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a way around it. And now at this point, there seems to be a way around everything related to the Constitution. And they seem to be desperately seeking every way they can to make sure that not only do they not have mandatory voting, they seem to not want voting. And now I'm regretting not advocating for mandatory voting before, except that the people who are sock puppeting multiple accounts to go around tossing slurs at people, who do you think they're going to vote for? I mean, we're going to end up with, I don't know, Pepe whatever as president. Or at least winning the election. Obviously, it'd be unconstitutional. But who knows?
Also, I need to note, Plato, I was recently having to do some deep diving research in his writing, and pretty fascisty when if you go back to the Republic and he's saying we're going to ban all the storytellers because we don't like the stories they tell, and we're going to create our own noble lies. That's like literally the English translation of the Greek there. We're going to tell people lies so they'll accept their lot that we tell them to run our ideal city. And it's like, oh, okay, the player book has been here for about 24 centuries.
We have one final super chat, unless somebody else sneaks one in, but $10 from the Atheist Mechanic. Is someone threatening? Oh, we didn't? Oh.
No.
I'll read it because it's easier for me, and then you can do Atheist Mechanics. There we go. $10 from Subjectively Stan. It was the Ferglist of times. It was the Monogelberglist of times. There, I even put a funny voice on for you. Thank you so much. It's been a while since we talked about Fergelbergel, Monogelbergel. And the possibly final one. No, but it's too much to explain now.
Okay, very well, very well. All right, so how about this $10 super chat from the Atheist Mechanic? Is someone threatening to beat you for being violent, similar to the drunk asking, "Who shit my pants?"
That was one of my favorite moments in one of the Marvel movies. I think somebody peed my pants. $10 from Joshua Everett. I'm having trouble with the fear that the Constitution is a dead letter. I still carry mine with me everywhere with them. Yeah, without the rule of law and without any confidence that either Congress can be an effective check or balance, and without any confidence that the Supreme Court can be any check or balance, the executive power is God. The Supreme Court has given unprecedented leeway. And in the old, if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile thing, they gave them a mile. And that's an incredible head start. And when they come out of the gate with the Project 2025 advocates flooding the zone with so much legislation and so much shutdown and so much outrage, and you cannot focus on all of it. It is simply impossible. And I tell you, I mentioned to Arden earlier, I want Mehdi Hasan to rule the planet right now. I mean, he's my number one person to rule the planet. Not because I agree with him on everything, but because for whatever reason, as my brain begins to not hang on to what I said 30 seconds ago, he impresses me as someone who's always ready to address something honestly with facts and good reasoning. I'm sure there's something we disagree on, but you know what? I would trust every right I have to him before I would trust any right anyone has to the current administration. And that's like, I'm not saying I want a dictator, but holy crap, given the choice of dictators, and there's probably 100 people out there who I would prefer to him if I only knew about them, if we'd only heard something, if I'd only, engaged more with something else. There's a thought I had when I was a kid, which is, what if every one of us would have been the world's best X? But because we never got interested in that, because we never had access to that, we'll never know that we would have been the world's best at anything. And so maybe there's something for which you might be the Michael Jordan. Somebody's going to say Michael Jordan's no longer the best. Fine, you get the point. It seems to me that exploring the world for options is the only way you're going to find out. And the more we as a society limit those options for people to explore, the poorer we all are for it. Not just because we might not get the next Michael Jordan, we might not get the next Jonas Salk, we might not get, the next Einstein, the next Stephen Hawking. We might not get, there may be somebody out there is primed to come up with a cure for cancer. But they won't ever get that opportunity because we can't figure out if it's okay for two dudes to fuck. Somebody out there has the capacity and the insight and the will and desire to end world hunger. And we may never find out because people are terrified of trans folks because they've been convinced that abortion is wrong in all circumstances, because they've been convinced that they're coming to take my jobs. That is a poor world. This isn't the next super chat on my list, so I don't know why it popped up, but go ahead and read this one and then I'll put up the other one.
Sure. All right, so we got $10 from Dante Verona. Everyone wants lower interest rates. Well, now, they are going down for now, except it's not for the reason Donald Trump wants. Stupid, self-inflicted tariffs, and because the U.S. jobs numbers are so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fake attempt to bolster the economy because otherwise you're headed for depression. $10 from Perfectly Flawed. Not voting is a choice people should have. However, election day should be a national holiday and voting should be made as easy as possible. I think that is a start. I prefer ranked choice voting. I'd prefer that everybody vote and then they're free to just say, hey, I willfully, ranked Mickey Mouse above everybody else. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe if we gave participation trophies.
Yeah, I think I agree with both of you that, having it easier to vote is good, and having a voting system that gets past our current system would be smarter, and there's a lot of political science and mathematics indicating it would actually get the opinions of the people much more representative in our system of government. So, my goodness, people go out and vote, make it easier to vote, and make it so our voices can actually be heard more clearly. Ranked choice seems like a really good option, way better than the current system.
On that note, we will leave Aaron with that final word. Thank you so much for the final super chat. Thank you so much to our producer, our call screener, our moderators, everybody who's watching and participating in the show. Don't forget that tomorrow, the Transatlantic Call-In Show is live at 2 o'clock. Arden, who's on? Up. I threw a curveball.
Sorry.
Anyway.
What is it you need?
I was going to say, who's on TACIS tomorrow?
Luxander and Josie.
Luxander and Josie. See, I was going to tell him that, it's not Arden's job to fill me in on shit I should have looked up, and you guys should just tune in tomorrow at 2 o'clock and find out for yourselves. In any case, try and find hope. And if you figure out how to find hope in this world, share those ideas with other people. Because I guarantee you, despite the fact that I'm here week in, week out, except for when I'm hospitalized for doing something stupid, I am struggling as much or more as anybody else. I'm in the thick of it. And all of us are going to need to depend on all of us to have any hope of implementing any change. On that note, thank you, everybody. Patreon.com/calltheline. You can go to linemerch.com. You can like, you can subscribe. But most of all, vote, speak your mind, reach out to other people, and participate. Because this show could go away any second. Just ask Jimmy Kimmel.
Mhm.
Oh, you can't.